What's good, everyone? This is The Fiction World, and boy do we have a treat for you. What if Deku married Charlie and built massive breeding empire with all Hazbin Hotel princesses? Hit subscribe and the bell. Let the story begin. Chapter 1, The Boy Who Fell into Hell. The rift opened without warning. One moment Izuku Midoriya was in the middle of the Tartarus sky, trading blows with a villain whose quirk had been tearing holes in reality for the better part of 40 minutes. Fissures in the air, black and crackling, edges burning white like overloaded circuitry. The villain, some mid-tier lunatic who'd stolen an experimental dimensional collapse device from a defunct Mayhatsum prototype facility, had been screaming something about transcendence. About breaking through the membrane of the world and reaching something beyond it. Deku had heard the speech twice already while systematically dismantling every major bone in the man's right side. He hadn't been paying close enough attention to the rift directly behind him. One for all at 100% sang through every cell in his body, that familiar electric roar, green lightning crawling up his arms, his legs, wrapping around his shoulders in coils of incandescent power. He'd launched off a chunk of floating debris, fist already cocked, black whip trailing behind him like a comet tail, trajectory locked on the villain's jaw. Clean. Final. Done. Then the rift swallowed him whole. No sound. No transition. Just the villain's surprised face, one eye wide, one swollen shut, and then absolute nothing for a single, stomach-dropping second, and then a sky that was the wrong color. Deep, bruised purple, the shade of old blood, streaked through with layers of amber and sulfur yellow. Not a sunset. Not a storm. Just wrong, in a way that Izuku's gut understood before his brain caught up. He was still moving at the velocity he'd launched at. There was a building below him. A large, ornate, deeply unsettling building that looked like a Victorian hotel had been rebuilt by someone with an obsession with both grandeur and decay. Spires. Stained glass. A sign he couldn't read at this speed. He had approximately 1 second to assess the situation. He tucked, rotated, killed as much forward momentum as he could with a black whip anchor to a stone gargoyle on the roofline, felt the gargoyle shatter under the force and yanked again at a chimney stack, bled off enough speed that when he punched through the roof it was a controlled entry rather than a crater-making catastrophe. Relatively. He came through 3 floors of ceiling, each impact slowing him further, wood and plaster and what appeared to be a chandelier made of what he chose not to identify, and landed in a crouch on a lobby floor with enough force to crack it in a starburst pattern 3 meters across. Silence. He stayed in his crouch for a moment, hands spread, one for all still humming just below full burn because he didn't know where he was and he'd learned years ago that dropping your guard before you understood your situation was how heroes died. Green lightning bled off him in quiet tendrils, curling against the cracked floor. Then he looked up. 7 people were staring at him. 5 of them were demons. 1 appeared to be a spider. 1 was wearing a tuxedo and smiling with an expression that contained no warmth whatsoever and a significant amount of something that might have been delight. And 1 of them, standing at the center of the group, blonde, tall, wearing a red suit that should have looked ridiculous but somehow didn't, was the most visibly optimistic person Izuku had ever seen in his life. Even with plaster in her hair and his entrance having clearly knocked her off her feet, she was already scrambling upright with her hands out like she was trying to de-escalate a situation that had not technically started yet. "Hi," she said. "Welcome to the Hazbin Hotel. Are you okay?" That looked like it really hurt. Izuku blinked. The chandelier he'd brought down with him chose that moment to finish its descent and shattered on the floor 3 feet to his left. "I've had worse," he said honestly. The one in the tuxedo, tall, red-skinned, wearing a smile that belonged on something much older and much more dangerous than it was pretending to be, tilted his head at an angle that was slightly too far to be comfortable. "Fascinating," said the radio demon, because that's what the blonde girl called him when she introduced everyone, along with a brief and slightly panicked rundown of names and a pointed look at the spider person that suggested this was not the time for certain things to be said. A dimensional interloper. And still radiating what I can only describe as a frankly obscene amount of power. How delightful. Alastair, the gray-skinned girl with the eye patch, said flatly. Not helpful. I'm always helpful, my dear Vaggie. I'm simply also entertained. Izuku had straightened up from his crouch. He was doing the thing he always did in new environments, cataloging, mapping, counting. 7 beings, lobby space roughly 20 by 30 meters, 3 visible exits, 1 now destroyed ceiling access. The gray one, Vaggie, was the threat assessment. Military posture, hand resting near something under her jacket, eyes that tracked him the way a spear tracks a target. The radio demon was something else entirely, something older, and Izuku filed that away for deeper consideration. The spider, Angel Dust, apparently, which was a choice of name, was leaning against a bar counter and looking at Izuku with an expression that was 50% appraising and 50% things Izuku had learned to clock and politely ignore. The small one, Nifty, had already picked up a broom and was sweeping around his feet while he stood there. You came through the ceiling, she said helpfully, so technically I think the mess is yours. I'm sorry about the ceiling, Izuku said, and meant it. And the floors. How many floors was that? 3. 4, said Vaggie. 4. Right. I'm sorry about the 4 floors. He glanced up through the holes he'd made, calculating. I can fix those. I'm good with structural work. Vaggie stared at him. You just fell through 4 stories of solid architecture and your first response is to offer to fix it. It's your building. I broke it. Charlie made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a surprised noise she hadn't meant to make out loud. When Izuku looked at her, she was pressing one hand over her mouth and her eyes were bright. There was something about her face, open in a way that people weren't usually open when they just had a stranger crash through their ceiling. Most people would be calling security. Or, in this case, whatever the equivalent of security was in a place that felt like, and Izuku was beginning to assemble this picture with the slightly surreal calm of someone who'd once fought a man who could turn into tectonic plates, what appeared to be an afterlife dimension. You're in hell, Charlie said, apparently having followed his train of thought from his expression alone. Sorry. I know that's a lot. Do you want to sit down? We have chairs. Most of them survived. I noticed the sign outside is in a different language, Izuku said. But this conversation is happening in Japanese. Translation is a hell thing, Angel Dust said from the bar, pouring something amber into a glass. Everybody hears everybody in their native tongue. It's either the best or the worst thing about the afterlife, depending on your day. He slid the glass down the bar. You look like you could use this. Izuku caught it reflexively. Looked at it. Set it down politely. I'm fine, thank you. You just fell through a building. Like I said. I've had worse. Angel Dust stared at him for a long moment. Then he picked up the glass and drank it himself. Yeah, okay. I like him. Charlie got him seated in what was left of the intact portion of the lobby while Vaggie stood slightly behind and to the left of Charlie with her arms crossed and her eye patch side toward him, because she'd clocked that he was tracking the side she kept hidden and decided to make it his problem, which Izuku respected. Alastair had drifted to a nearby pillar and was listening with the posture of someone who found all conversations equally entertaining and equally below him. Nifty had disappeared into what Izuku assumed was a supply closet. Husk, a large winged cat demon who had been behind the bar this whole time and apparently hadn't found anything in the situation worth interrupting his drink for, grunted. So. Living person. Is that unusual? Izuku asked. Extremely, Charlie said. Living people don't just fall into hell. The dimensional barrier is supposed to be, well, it's supposed to be solid. The person I was fighting had a device that was tearing holes in dimensional fabric, Izuku said. I think one of the holes intersected with whatever the barrier is here and I went through it when I was moving at, he thought about the math, about 460 kilometers per hour. Vaggie's eye narrowed. You were moving at 460, approximately. I was still decelerating from my launch. And you walked it off. Crouched it off, technically. He looked at his hands. The green lightning had faded. One for all was idling, waiting. I heal fast. This was apparently the sentence that made Vaggie decide he needed a more thorough interrogation, because she uncrossed her arms and took 2 steps forward and looked at him with the particular intensity of someone who had been responsible for other people's safety for long enough that it had become structural to who they were. "What are you?" she asked. Not rude. Clinical. The way you ask a question when the answer matters. Human, Izuku said. I'm a hero. My name is Izuku Midoriya. Deku is what most people call me in the field. I have a power called One for All. He considered how to explain quirk theory to what appeared to be the residents of an afterlife dimension. It's a stockpiled ability that gets passed from person to person and accumulates strength over generations. I'm the 9th holder. At full power I can, he paused, do quite a lot. The ceiling, Husk said dryly. We noticed. Right. Charlie had been listening with her chin resting on one hand, and there was something in her expression that Izuku couldn't fully read yet, attentive in a way that felt like she was collecting details, filing them somewhere careful. You're a hero, she said. Like, that's your actual job. You help people. Yes. Even people who don't, even people who might not deserve it by some definitions. There was something underneath that question. Izuku looked at her directly. What's the other option? Deciding who deserves help and then only helping them? That's not heroism. That's just preference with better branding. The silence that followed was the kind that meant something had landed somewhere it wasn't expected to. Charlie looked at Vaggie. Vaggie looked back at Charlie with an expression that was doing several things simultaneously and trying to hide all of them. He's been here for 8 minutes, Vaggie said quietly. I know, Charlie said. He broke 4 floors. I know. I'm just noting, Vaggie. Vaggie closed her mouth. Charlie turned back to Izuku with the particular brightness of someone whose idea had just gotten unexpectedly and thoroughly reinforced. Okay, she said. So here's the thing. This is the Hazbin Hotel. My name is Charlie Magna. My father is Lucifer, okay, and my project, my dream, is to prove that the souls in hell can be redeemed and reach heaven. That people who made terrible choices aren't permanently defined by those choices. That change is possible. She took a breath. Nobody believes me. Basically everyone thinks it's stupid. Heaven sent an army to kill everyone here 6 months ago and we survived, but they're going to do it again, and we're rebuilding. Trying to get stronger. Trying to get better. And then you fell through my ceiling. She said that last part without any particular drama, just a statement of sequence, and somehow that made it land harder. Izuku looked at her for a long moment. At the brightness in her that wasn't naive, he knew the difference between someone who didn't understand the difficulty of what they'd chosen and someone who understood it exactly and had decided to do it anyway. The second kind were rarer. The second kind were worth everything. Heaven sent an army, he said. And you're still here. We are. And your plan is, redemption. Rehabilitation. Proving that souls can change. For the entire population of hell. Eventually, yes. Izuku was quiet for a moment. The math of what she just described was staggering. The institutional opposition alone, an army from heaven, presumably the full weight of divine bureaucracy, centuries of established theological framework, would have crushed the optimism out of most people before the project even had a name. Charlie was describing a war on the fundamental assumptions of the afterlife, and she was doing it with the calm certainty of someone who had simply decided they were right and intended to prove it. He'd met people like this before. All might have been like this. That particular quality, not stubbornness, not delusion, but a kind of gravitational certainty about what was possible, was the rarest thing he knew. I'll help, he said. Vaggie made a sharp sound. You've been here 8 minutes. 9. Now, Alastor offered pleasantly from his pillar. You don't know this place, Vaggie pressed. You don't know the politics, the overlords, the power structures, the way heaven operates. No, Izuku agreed. But I know how to learn fast, I know how to fight, and I know how to work toward things that most people think are impossible. He met her eye. What am I missing that makes those things not useful here? Vaggie opened her mouth. Closed it. Looked at Charlie with an expression that said I want to object to this and I can't find the actual argument. He does have a point, Angel Dust said from the bar. Nobody asked you. I'm a fixture of this establishment, babe. I ask myself. The rest of that first day was a blur of orientation that Izuku absorbed the way he absorbed everything, completely, systematically, with his mental notebook running constantly. Hell was vast. The geography alone was enough to fill several notebooks, and he'd moved on to his second mental volume by the time Charlie finished the tour. The hotel occupied a piece of Pentagram City, the urban center of the Pride Ring, one of 7 rings each governed by a different sin. The politics were layered and ancient and deeply complicated by the fact that power here was literal. The stronger you were, the more territory you held, and the more territory you held, the more souls you influenced. The overlords were the power players. Entities old and dangerous enough to have carved out chunks of hell for themselves and defended them long enough that the carving had become ownership. Alastor was one of them, though he operated differently from the others, less territorial, more interested in contracts and entertainment. The others were less abstract in their dangers. Vox wants this building flattened, Angel Dust said during what served as dinner, which was apparently optional and mostly for guests who'd been alive recently enough to still want food. He'd put together something from the bar kitchen that was better than it had any right to be. Him and Valentino and Velvet, they run the eastern districts and they've had a bug up their ass about this place since before the extermination. Why specifically? Izuku asked. Charlie's dad is Lucifer. That makes Charlie the crown princess of hell. Vox and the others would love to either control her or erase her, either one expands their power base considerably. Angel Dust speared something with a fork. The only reason they haven't moved on this place directly is Alastor. He scares them. Does he scare you? Izuku asked. Angel Dust was quiet for a beat. Little bit, he admitted. Yeah. Izuku nodded. He'd spent 30 seconds in Alastor's company before cataloging the radio demon as something operating on a fundamentally different level from almost everything else he'd encountered. The smile was a mask, but not the kind people wore to hide weakness, the kind worn by something that simply found the concealment itself amusing. There was patience in Alastor. The patience of something that had been powerful for long enough that urgency had become optional. He agreed to protect the hotel, Izuku said. What did that cost? Angel Dust looked at him. Charlie doesn't know the details. But you have a guess. Another pause. Yeah. I have a guess. He didn't elaborate, and Izuku didn't push. There were things you earned the right to know, and he was 9 hours into this world. He found Charlie on the hotel roof that night, which in hell was a specific shade of dark that never quite reached black, the sky maintaining that bruised purple with distant fires visible on the horizon like the world's most ominous city lights. She was sitting on the edge of the roof with her legs dangling and she'd lost the jacket somewhere and she was looking out at Pentagram City with the expression of someone having a very long conversation with themselves. He sat down next to her. Left a respectful distance. She glanced at him sideways. Can't sleep. Don't need much. 4 hours usually. He looked out at the city. It's a lot to look at. It is. She was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Of course. When I told you about the project, about redemption, all of it, and you said you'd help. She turned to look at him directly. Was that, did you mean it? Or was that just, I meant it, he said. Just like that. Just like that. She studied his face. Most people hear the pitch and then they come up with reasons. The logistics are too complicated, the scope is too large, heaven will just send another army, the souls here are genuinely terrible people who made genuinely terrible choices, all of that is true, Izuku said. The logistics are complicated and the scope is enormous and heaven will almost certainly send another army. He looked at her. That's not a reason not to try. That's just a description of the problem. Problems have solutions. Charlie was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again her voice was a little softer. You must have been a very exhausting student. Izuku laughed, and it surprised him, a real laugh, not the polite social kind. My teachers would agree with that. She smiled. Not the big, performed smile from the lobby, something smaller and more real. Where are you from? Originally. Before hell. Japan. Tokyo, mostly, though I trained all over. He thought about it. I grew up wanting to be a hero more than I wanted almost anything. Like it was the only thing I could imagine being. And then I got there and it turned out, he paused, finding the honest version of this, it turned out being a hero is mostly about deciding what you're willing to carry. The weight of other people's problems. Their fear. Their worst moments. And deciding you're willing to carry all of it, every day, indefinitely. Charlie was watching him the way she'd watched him in the lobby, collecting him carefully. And you were willing. Still am. Even here. Even now, in a dimension you've never seen before, surrounded by demons, with no way home. I haven't found a problem with no solution yet, he said. Give me time. She laughed at that, quiet and genuine, and turned back to the city. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fires of hell burning steadily on the horizon, and Izuku took the time to actually feel what had happened to him today, the rift, the fall, the landing, all of it, and let it settle into the category of things that have happened that I will now move forward from, which was a category he'd been filling since he was 4 years old and a doctor had told him he'd never have a quirk. We'll figure out the way home, Charlie said eventually, as though she'd been following his thoughts. If you want to go home. Eventually, he said. I've got people there. He thought of Achiko, of Ida, of his mother, and the thought carried its familiar weight. But they're safe. And you, this project, this is, he searched for the word, unfinished. And important. And there's something fundamentally wrong with leaving important unfinished things. Charlie looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her expression, something he didn't try to name yet because it was too new and too complicated and naming things too early was how you made them wrong. You're strange, she said. Not unkindly. Everyone says that eventually. I mean it as a compliment. I know. 3 days into his stay at the Hazbin Hotel, Vox made his move. Izuku had spent those 3 days learning everything he could about Hell's political geography, absorbing it from every available source, Charlie's encyclopedic knowledge, Baggy's tactical assessments, Angel Dust's street-level intelligence, Alastair's dangerously well-curated observations, and Husk's terse but surprisingly accurate reading of power dynamics from behind the bar. He'd also spent several hours in the basement that Nifty had converted into something between a workshop and a war room, filling 17 mental notebooks and 2 actual notebooks he'd found in a storage closet. He knew, by day 3, that Vox was going to do something. The pattern was there, escalating surveillance, pressure on the surrounding blocks, a few two-pointed visits from Vox's lower-tier associates to businesses adjacent to the hotel. Classic territorial squeeze. Make the environment hostile enough and even the most stubborn tenant starts considering relocation. What he hadn't expected was the scale. Vox didn't send messengers. He sent 47 armed demons through the hotel's front door at 2 in the morning, while Izuku was in the middle of teaching Vaggie a pressure point sequence she could use with her spear regardless of an opponent's size differential. They heard the crash of the doors from the training space in the east wing, and Vaggie was moving before the sound finished, which told Izuku everything about how many times she'd been awakened by this kind of thing before. He followed a half step behind, already pulling one for all up from idle to operational, the green lightning building across his arms with the quiet intensity of something that had learned patience over many years of use. They came through the east corridor into the lobby and found 47 demons arranged in a rough semicircle with weapons raised, and Charlie standing in the middle of the lobby floor in a red pajama set with her hair half down, looking absolutely furious. Standing at the head of the group was a demon Izuku hadn't met yet, big, ostentatious, wearing a suit that was trying very hard to be impressive and largely succeeding on surface level. He had a phone for a head, which Izuku filed into the increasingly robust mental category of hell, things that are just like that. Charlie Magna, the phone-headed demon said, and the screen on his face was running static interspersed with a smiling avatar. I'm here as a representative of Overlord Vox with a simple and generous offer. Vacate this building and cede this block by dawn, and everyone inside walks away. No, Charlie said. The demon blinked, or the screen equivalent of blinked. I haven't finished. You were going to say walks away unharmed, Charlie said. That's the standard phrasing. And the answer is no. This is my hotel. This is my project. You go back to Vox and you tell him I said no, and if he wants to try something he can come try it himself instead of sending someone else's Tuesday to do his threatening. The demon stared at her. Then he looked at the 46 behind him, apparently recalibrating, and turned back with the practiced patience of someone who delivered ultimatums to people who hadn't understood they were supposed to accept them. Miss Magna, he said. You need to understand the, hi, said Izuku. He stepped forward from the east corridor entrance, and he hadn't done anything yet, no lightning, no black whip, no full cowl deployed beyond baseline. He'd just stepped into the room and spoken at a conversational volume. But something about the way he moved, the easy unhurried quality of it, and something about what was clearly radiating off him even at baseline, the sense of a pressure system the way weather has pressure, present and building, made 3 of the 47 demons take one involuntary step back. I'm new here, Izuku said pleasantly. I'm still learning how things work in this dimension. So help me understand, the hotel belongs to Charlie, right? The Princess of Hell. The phone-headed demon turned to him. Who are you? I'm a guest. And from what I understand of the politics here, he glanced at the demon with the genuine interest of someone who had spent 3 days doing very thorough research. Attacking the daughter of Lucifer in her own home is the kind of decision that usually has significant consequences. Vox knows this. Which means either he's decided he's strong enough to absorb those consequences, or he's betting that Lucifer won't find out, or, Izuku tilted his head slightly, he's testing. Seeing what response he gets before he commits to a real play. Silence. This is a test, Izuku said. Which means the important thing isn't the outcome of the fight. It's the message the outcome sends. He looked at the 47 demons arranged in the lobby of a hotel that had survived an army from heaven. So here's the message. He brought one for all to full. The green lightning exploded across him, not a slow build, not a theatrical ramp, just full presence, immediate and complete, filling the lobby with crackling light and a pressure that wasn't physical but was absolutely felt. The air changed. The kind of change that happens when something categorically different from everything in the room makes itself known. Several more demons stepped back. 2 of them turned for the door. The phone-headed representative had gone very still, his screen cycling through several colors rapidly. Tell Vox, Izuku said, that the hotel is occupied. And the next time he sends someone through that door without an invitation, I will personally deliver the response to his living room. He let the lightning run for another 3 seconds, not threatening, just present, just real, and then pulled it back to baseline with the effortless control of someone who had been managing this power for years. Have a good night. Nobody moved for a long moment. Then the representative turned, said something to the group in a register too low for Izuku to catch, and they left. All of them. Quick, quiet, the doors swinging shut behind them. Vaggie stood 2 steps to Izuku's right with her weapon out and an expression on her face that was working through several stages of something. You didn't even throw a punch, she said. Didn't need to. He watched the doors settle. Vox is intelligent. He responds to information. That was information. Husk had appeared from behind the bar at some point during the standoff, glass in hand, and was looking at Izuku with the expression of a being who had been old for a very long time and had therefore developed an extremely accurate sense for when something had fundamentally changed. "Kid," Husk said. "Yes." "That was either the smartest thing anyone's done in this hotel since Charlie opened it," he said, "or it just made everything significantly worse." "Both things can be true," Izuku said. Husk considered this. Took a long drink. "Yeah," he said. "Fair enough." Charlie was looking at him from the center of the lobby with the red pajamas and the half-undone hair, and she had an expression on her face that Izuku couldn't read yet, complicated, bright, layered with something she clearly hadn't decided what to do with. He met her eyes. Neither of them said anything. "Okay," Nifty said from somewhere near the staircase, appearing with a dust mop. "I'm going to clean up whatever that weird lightning residue is before it stains the floor, and then I think everyone should go back to bed, and in the morning we should have a meeting about organizational infrastructure, which I have been suggesting for weeks and nobody listens to me, but possibly now people will listen to me." "Nifty," Baggy said. "I'm just saying." Alastair, who had been present for the entire standoff in the way weather is present, pervasive, noticed, not quite there, unfolded from his position near the far pillar and clapped his hands together once with the cheerful air of someone whose evening had gone exactly as interestingly as he'd hoped. "Well," he said, static bleeding pleasantly into his voice. "I think that's enough excitement for a Tuesday. Wonderful to see you in action, my dear boy. Truly. Thoroughly entertaining." He smiled at Izuku with those depthless eyes. "We should talk. Soon." "Looking forward to it," Izuku said, and meant it, which clearly surprised Alastair just slightly, a flicker behind the smile, a recalibration too brief for most people to catch. Izuku caught it. He filed it, added it to the notebook, and walked back to his room to write everything down while it was still fresh. Because if tomorrow was anything like today, he was going to need very thorough notes. Behind him, he heard Charlie say something quiet to Vaggie, and Vaggie respond in a tone that was trying to be skeptical and landing somewhere considerably warmer than that. He didn't try to hear what they were saying. He didn't need to yet. But he was already thinking, in the careful systematic way he thought about everything important, about what it meant to build something in a place like this. What it would take. What it would cost. And whether the kind of foundation you could pour in hell could hold the weight of something that actually mattered. He thought, not for the first time today and not for the last time in his life, about the difference between arriving somewhere and choosing it. He thought about Charlie's face when she'd said redemption. He thought about the way 47 armed demons had walked out a door because he'd simply shown them what he was. Then he opened his notebook and started writing, and outside the window of the Hazbin Hotel the fires of hell burned on like they always had, ancient and indifferent and completely unaware that something had just changed in the building on this particular street in Pentagram City. Something that was going to keep changing. Chapter 2, the weight of a promise. The meeting Nifty had been demanding happened the next morning. She'd set up the dining room herself, arranging chairs with the focused intensity of someone who had been waiting for this moment and intended to extract maximum organizational efficiency from it. There was a chalkboard. There were color-coded sections on the chalkboard. There was a small bell that she rang once, sharply, when everyone had sat down, which made Husk flinch and Angel Dust make a noise of protest and Vaggie reach for coffee with the grim focus of someone who had accepted that this was happening. Izuku sat to Charlie's left. He had his notebook open. He'd been awake since 5 with 2 hours of sleep and felt completely fine, which was the kind of thing that one for all did to your physiology once you've been running it long enough. The body adapted to carrying that much power and sleep debt became almost theoretical. "Right," Charlie said, looking around the table. "So. We have a situation." "Several situations," Vaggie said. "Several situations. In order of urgency, Vox," said Husk. "Vox," Charlie agreed. "After last night, He knows the hotel has. She glanced at Izuku with a slight search for words, a new resident with significant capabilities. That changes his calculus, but it doesn't eliminate the threat. If anything, it might accelerate his timeline. He'll want to know exactly what I am before he moves again, Izuku said. Which buys us time. He's the type who gathers intelligence before committing. The test last night confirmed that. He had 47 demons and he sent them in without weapons hot. That's reconnaissance, not assault. How do you know he's that type? Vaggie asked. The question wasn't hostile, it was the question of someone taking notes. The suit. The screen. The avatar he uses for a face. Izuku tapped his pen against his notebook. He controls his image meticulously. People who care that much about how they look operate with strategy, not impulse. Impulsive overlords don't build the kind of media network Angel told me Vox has built. They conquer and burn. Vox constructs. Angel Dust was eating something from a bowl and pointing at Izuku with the spoon. He's right. Vox thinks 3 moves ahead minimum. So do we, Izuku said. That's the advantage of knowing your opponent's operating style. He'll gather intelligence on me. So we give him intelligence, specifically the intelligence we want him to have. Vaggie set down her coffee. You want to craft what he learns about you. Selectively. Not lies, he'd find the seams eventually and it'd damage credibility. Just emphasis. He finds out I'm powerful. He finds out I'm allied with the hotel. He finds out I'm not reactive. He looked around the table. Reactive threats get hunted. Strategic presences get negotiated with. The silence that followed was the working kind, the kind where people were turning information over and checking it from different angles. Okay, Charlie said slowly. Yes. That's good. What else? The redemption program, Izuku said. What's the actual bottleneck? Not the philosophical opposition from heaven, the operational bottleneck. What prevents souls from making genuine progress right now? Charlie blinked. It was clearly not the direction she'd expected the conversation to go. The structure is still being built. We have the hotel as a space, but the program itself needs curriculum, Nifty said immediately, pointing at a section of the chalkboard. Accountability systems. Intake process. Goal-setting framework. Progress metrics. I have 17 proposals and nobody has reviewed a single one. Nifty, Vaggie said carefully. 17, Nifty repeated with great emphasis. We should review them, Izuku said. Nifty turned to him with an expression of profound vindication. Thank you. Finally. After the Vox issue is stabilized. He looked at her. Your organizational instincts are exactly what this program needs. Everything else is temporary problem solving, your work is the actual foundation. It should be built right. Nifty stared at him. Her eye was very large and very bright. I would die for you, she said. Let's not go that far. I would die for you a normal amount. Better. Charlie was watching this exchange with a smile that she was trying to keep professional and was failing at, and Vaggie was watching Charlie watching it, and Angel Dust had abandoned any pretense of eating and was just leaning on the table with his chin in one hand looking like he was watching a theatrical performance he found deeply satisfying. Husk said nothing. He was on his second coffee and he had the look of a being who had been alive long enough to recognize when things were beginning to move. The Vox situation developed faster than anticipated. Not Vox himself, his move came 3 days later, which was almost precisely what Izuku had predicted. But in the intervening time, a different problem walked through the hotel's newly repaired front doors in the form of an overlord named Zestial. Old. Visibly, cosmically old, in the way that some entities carried their age not in their faces but in the air around them, a density of history that pressed against the room. Tall, spider-limbed, dressed in formal wear that belonged to a century before any of the hotel's current residents had died. He arrived without announcement, without entourage, and with the particular calm of something that had never needed either. He looked at Izuku for a very long time without speaking. Izuku looked back. "You are the one who spoke to Vox's representative," Zestial said eventually. His voice was slow and resonant and heavily accented in a way that made the translation quirk of hell work slightly harder. "I wish to see thee for myself." "And?" Izuku said. "Thou art young," Zestial said. "And carrying something ancient." He tilted his head at the angle of something genuinely curious rather than something calculating. "I have not felt a power that layered in some considerable time." "One for all," Izuku said. "It carries the strength of 8 people before me. 9, counting thyself." "Yes." Zestial considered this. Then he turned to Charlie with the slow courtesy of a being for whom rushing was a concept that applied to other people. "Your Highness. The Elder Overlords watch your project with varying degrees of interest. I wish thee to know that my degree is not hostile." Charlie, who had been standing very still with the careful posture of someone in the presence of something ancient enough to require care, relaxed fractionally. "Thank you, Zestial. That, genuinely means a lot." "Vox will move within 3 days, Zestial said. "He is not pleased by last night's performance. It disrupted a narrative he has been carefully building regarding your vulnerability." The old overlord's gaze drifted back to Izuku. "What he sends next will be more significant than 47 soldiers." "How significant?" Vaggie asked. "Sufficient to destroy this building entirely," Zestial said pleasantly. "Good day." He left. The room held a specific kind of silence that happens after something ancient says something definitive and then removes itself from the consequences. "Right," Angel Dust said. "So that happened." 3 days, Vaggie said, already thinking tactically, her eye moving across the lobby with the automatic recalculation of someone mapping defensible positions. "We reinforced the building. We set perimeter." "No," Izuku said. Vaggie turned to him. "No. Fortifying tells Vox the building is our anchor. That we're static." He was already moving, pacing the lobby with the particular rhythm he had when something was assembling in his head. "We're not static. I'm not static. The hotel doesn't need to be a fortress, it needs to be a base. There's a difference. You want to take the fight to him. I want to remove his leverage before he uses it." He stopped pacing. "Where does Vox's actual power come from? Not his personal combat ability, his structural power. The thing that makes him an overlord. His media network," Charlie said immediately. "Vox Tech. Screens everywhere in Pentagram City. He controls information flow for a significant portion of the Pride Ring. And the souls who are locked into contracts with him through that network," Angel Dust added, and something shifted in his voice on that sentence, something personal that he didn't elaborate on. Izuku heard it. Filed it. Didn't push. "If Vox's network is his power base," Izuku said, "then attacking the hotel is a distraction. What he actually wants is to demonstrate that opposing him has consequences. It's about the audience, it's always been about the audience with him. He wants every soul in Pentagram City to see that Charlie Magna's project crumbles under pressure." He looked at Charlie. "He wants the story. So we change the story before he tells it." Charlie was very still. "How?" "We hold a public event," Izuku said. "Something visible, something that every screen in Pentagram City has to cover or look irrelevant. Something that demonstrates the hotel is not only standing but growing." He looked at her directly. "You've been trying to make the redemption program credible. What's the most credible thing you could demonstrate publicly?" Charlie thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. "A soul who's made genuine progress," she said. "Someone who came to the hotel broken and became better. Visibly better. In a way that even the skeptics would have to acknowledge." "Who's furthest along?" Izuku asked. Everyone at the table looked at Angel Dust. Angel Dust looked back at everyone at the table. His expression did something complicated that he immediately covered with a raised eyebrow and a tilted head and a voice that came out much more casual than his eyes were. "Oh, don't look at me. Angel," Charlie said gently. "I'm serious. Don't. I've been here, okay, that's all." He stood up from his chair with the deliberate casualness of someone who needed to not be sitting down for this conversation. "I show up, I don't steal anything major, occasionally I help with whatever disaster is happening that week. That's not progress, that's just occupancy." "That's not what I see," Charlie said. "Charlie, Angel." Her voice was soft but it had steel underneath it, the particular quality Izuku had been cataloging in her, not hardness, but certainty. The ability to hold a truth steadily in front of someone who was trying to look away from it. "You are not who you were when you first walked through that door. I see you every day. I know the difference." Angel Dust was quiet for a moment. He was looking at the middle distance with an expression that he'd sealed several layers of performance over but which Izuku, standing at the right angle, could read parts of. Pain. Old pain, the kind that had been carried so long it had become part of the architecture of a person. "It's not nothing," Husk said from the end of the table, gruff and quiet and without looking up from his coffee. "What you've done. It's not nothing." Another silence. Then Angel Dust made a sound that was a laugh but without the humor. "You guys are the worst," he said. "Genuinely. The most annoying people I have ever, fine." He sat back down. "Fine. What would this event look like? They built it in 2 days. Izuku worked alongside everyone, not directing, not dictating, integrating. He'd learned early that the most effective thing a leader could do in an unfamiliar environment was demonstrate competence in the tasks that existed and let the people who knew the ground set the direction. So he carried lumber when the building needed reinforcement after his entrance damage repairs, and he sat with Nifty for 3 hours going through her 17 proposals and identifying the 4 that were immediately implementable, and he spent an evening with Vaggie working through tactical scenarios with a chalkboard and a level of mutual focus that began as professional and gradually became the particular warmth that develops between 2 people who think in the same tactical register. "You were a soldier," he said during one of those sessions, not a question. Vaggie was quiet for a moment. "Something like that." "Exorcist," he said, because he'd done the research and Alastair had confirmed it in the way Alastair confirmed things, by not denying it while smiling with great apparent pleasure at the conversation. Her jaw tightened. "Yes. Does Charlie know?" "She knows. And she loves me anyway," Vaggie said, and there was a fierceness to it, a daring, the voice of someone who had been braced for a judgment that kept not arriving. "Of course she does," Izuku said simply, and went back to the chalkboard. Vaggie stared at his back for a moment. Then she went back to the chalkboard too, and something in her posture had shifted by approximately 3 degrees towards something that wasn't quite trust yet but was moving in that direction steadily. The event itself was a public showcase in the plaza in front of the hotel. Charlie had called in every contact she had, which turned out to be a surprisingly robust network built over years of earnest relationship maintenance. The press showed up, which in hell meant a contingent of journalists whose ethical standards ranged from questionable to non-existent, but showing up was showing up. Several souls from the surrounding blocks came out of a combination of curiosity and the free food Nifty had organized with terrifying logistical efficiency. And then Angel Dust performed. Not in the way he performed at Valentino's, the other performance, the one Izuku had learned about in fragments from conversations and silences and Angel Dust's particular flinch reflex around certain kinds of attention. This was something different. A song he'd written, apparently, in the small hours over the past months, that he'd never intended to show anyone and had agreed to show everyone because Charlie had asked and because somewhere between all the noise and the performance and the carefully maintained front, Angel Dust had a core that was trying, and trying mattered. He stood in the plaza in front of the hotel with a microphone and he sang, and it was raw in the way things are raw when they're real, and the crowd that had come for free food and spectacle went quiet in the particular way crowds go quiet when something true is happening. Izuku stood at the back of the plaza and watched. Watched the crowd. Watched the screens on the surrounding buildings, Vox's screens, everywhere, because this was his city, cycle through their usual programming and then, one by one, cut to the feed from the plaza because the alternative was for Vox's network to be the only thing in Pentagram City not covering what was clearly a significant event. He'd known that would happen. Charlie appeared at his shoulder. "It's working," she said quietly. "He's extraordinary," Izuku said, meaning angel dust. "Genuinely. He is." She was watching with her arms wrapped around herself, bright-eyed. "He'd hate it if you told him that." "I'll tell him anyway." She laughed quietly. "Then, after a moment, you planned this. Not just the logistics. You knew Vox would have to cover it." "He can't afford the narrative of ignoring it," Izuku confirmed. "Something genuine is happening in this plaza right now and every soul in Pentagram City can see that. If Vox's screens don't show it, he looks afraid. And overlords cannot afford to look afraid. So you used his own network to broadcast the thing he was trying to prevent." "Leverage isn't always about force," Izuku said. "Sometimes it's just about understanding what someone can't afford to do." Charlie was quiet for a moment, watching him. The plaza light caught her face, sulfur warm and amber, and she was smiling the small real smile, the one that wasn't the performance but the actual thing underneath. "Where did you learn to think like this?" she asked. "Years of fighting people who were smarter and more powerful than me," he said. "When you can't win on raw ability, you win on understanding." And then later when the ability caught up, he shrugged, understanding was just a habit by then. Charlie turned back to the plaza. "You could leave, you know," she said. "If you found a way home tomorrow. You don't owe us anything." "I know," he said. "But you're still thinking about staying." He was quiet for a moment. Around them the song was building toward its end, and the crowd was very still, and somewhere on a screen 15 meters away Vox's algorithm was doing the math and arriving at conclusions Izuku had already calculated 3 days ago. "I've been a hero my whole life," he said finally. "And I think I always understood it theoretically, what it meant, why it mattered, all of it. But this place," he looked around. At the hotel behind them, at the crowd in front, at Vaggie standing sharp-eyed near the stage and Nifty circling the perimeter making sure everything was running and Husk leaning in the hotel doorway watching with the particular warmth of someone who would never admit to warmth. "This project. What you're trying to do. It's the most ambitious version of the thing I believe in that I've ever encountered. And I don't know how to stand next to that and walk away." Charlie didn't say anything. She just looked at him, and the expression on her face was doing the layered complicated thing it had been doing increasingly over the past few days, and Izuku had been carefully not naming it because naming things too early. "Charlie," he said. "Yeah. I'm also," he stopped. "Found the honest version. I think you're extraordinary. Not just the project. You." She went very still. "You don't have to do anything with that information," he said. "It doesn't change anything about why I'm staying or what I'm going to do. I think you should know that I see you. Not just the dream. The actual person who decided to carry the dream. And he paused, she's someone I'd want to know even if there were no project. Even if there were no hell." The song ended. The plaza erupted. And in the noise and the light and the moment, Charlie Magna looked at Izuku Midoriya with the full weight of an expression she hadn't prepared a name for either, and reached out and took his hand, and held it, and didn't let go. Vox moved on the third day, as predicted. He didn't send soldiers this time. He sent Zestial's warning had described as sufficient to destroy this building entirely, which turned out to be 2 of his personally contracted heavy-class demons, entities that had been Overlord adjacent in their own right before signing into Vox's network. They came at 3 in the afternoon, which was deliberate, maximum visibility, maximum daylight on Vox's screens, maximum audience for the demonstration. Izuku met them in the street outside the hotel. He was alone. That had been a point of significant argument with Vaggie, who had made several excellent tactical cases for a coordinated response, and with Charlie, who had made several excellent emotional cases for him not to stand in front of two entities who could level a city block by himself. He'd listened to all of it thoughtfully and then walked outside by himself because the message he needed to send required the visual of one person. One person, alone, in the street, unbothered. The two heavies were massive. One of them was made of what appeared to be condensed shadow and molten metal, 15 feet tall, radiating heat that Izuku could feel from 30 meters away. The other was broader, squat, armored in something that had the density of collapsed matter, carrying a weapon that was functionally a small siege engine made personal. They looked at him. He stood in the street with his hands in his pockets. One for all at idle. "You're the human," the shadow one said. "I am," Izuku confirmed. "Vox sends his regards." "Tell Vox he should have come himself," Izuku said. "It would have been more efficient." The two heavies exchanged a look. Then the shadow one moved. What happened next took approximately 4 minutes and was witnessed by every soul within 3 blocks and every camera on every screen that Vox controlled, which meant by the time it was over, most of Pentagram City had seen at least portions of it. The two heavies were not small problems. Izuku acknowledged this internally with the part of his mind that ran constant tactical assessment. They were fast, they were powerful, and they fought with the coordination of beings who had worked together for a long time. He was faster. One for all at full was a different thing from one for all at partial. Not a difference of degree but of kind, like the difference between a fire and the thing that makes fire possible. The green lightning came fully alive and Izuku moved through the fight with the precision of 9 people's worth of accumulated martial understanding, Black Whip controlling space and range, FA Gene storing and releasing kinetic energy in the specific windows between the heavies' attack patterns, Float giving him the vertical axis they hadn't accounted for. He didn't damage the surrounding buildings. This was a technical choice that required approximately 40% of his concentration while the other 60% fought 2 Overlord-class demons, making sure every shockwave went up and out rather than lateral, every engagement angle chosen to funnel force skyward. The street cracked under the Shadow One's impacts. Izuku's impacts hit targets with surgical specificity. The Shadow One went down first. Not destroyed, incapacitated, Black Whip wrapped tight, One for All's output holding the binding with the casual ease of something that had exceeded the needed force threshold considerably and was simply running maintenance. The armored one lasted another 90 seconds before Fa Jin's accumulated charge came out as a single focus strike that removed the siege weapon and the armor simultaneously and left the demon sitting in the street in a crater looking at his empty hands with the expression of something that had just been comprehensively disassembled. Izuku stood in the middle of the street. Not breathing hard. The lightning faded back to idle. He looked up at the nearest camera screen. Vox's network. Broadcasting everything. He spoke directly to it. Calmly, clearly, at a volume that any decent camera system would pick up cleanly. This is the second time Vox has sent someone to the hotel. There won't be a useful third time. He looked at the camera for 1 more second, then turned and walked back inside. Behind him, the street was quiet. Around the block, from multiple directions, he could hear the sound of people who had been watching from windows and doorways beginning to talk. The narrative had changed. He knew at the moment he walked through the hotel doors and found Vaggie standing in the lobby with her arms crossed, and she looked at him with an expression that was moving through several stages of assessment and landing, slowly and somewhat unwillingly, on something close to satisfaction. "Clean," she said. "Tried to keep the property damage minimal. You succeeded." A pause. "Mostly. The street. The street. I'll fix it." She almost smiled. "I know you will." She uncrossed her arms. "Alastair wants to talk to you." "I figured." "And Charlie," Vaggie paused, and her voice shifted in the particular way it shifted when Charlie was the subject, full of a protectiveness that wasn't possessive anymore but had made room for something else. "She's on the roof again." He found her in the same spot, the edge, legs dangling, looking at the city. This time the sky had a particular quality that passed for dusk in hell, the fires on the horizon brighter, the purple deepening towards something richer. She heard him coming and didn't turn around, just made space beside her. He sat down. For a while neither of them said anything. Down in the street he could see the aftermath, a small crowd gathered, people on their phones, Vox's cameras still running but the screens showing replays of the fight rather than new programming. The algorithm doing its job in the shape Izuku had designed for it. "I watched from the window," Charlie said. "Was it bad?" "It was," she paused, choosing. "It was the most terrifying and impressive thing I've ever seen from a distance." Vaggie said mostly clean. Vaggie says mostly clean the way other people say magnificent. She turned to look at him. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "I know you're fine physically. I mean," she gestured vaguely, "you just fought 2 Overlord-class demons in the street to protect my building." "It's your project," he said. "The building is secondary." "Izuku." She said his actual name, not Deku, and it landed differently than it had before, like she'd been keeping it for something. "You told me last night, I meant it." "I know you meant it." She was quiet for a moment. "I've been running this hotel for months. Trying to make people believe something is possible that nobody believes in. And I love it, I love this project, I love these people, I'd burn everything down before I gave up on it." She looked at her hands in her lap. "But it's also lonely, sometimes. Being the one who believes the hardest. Being the one everyone else is relying on to be certain when they're not." Izuku was quiet, listening. "And then you fell through my ceiling," she said, and laughed a little. "Literally. 4 floors. And in 4 days she stopped, you see what I'm trying to do. Not just what it looks like or what it costs, what it actually is. And she shook her head slightly. "I don't know how to explain it. It just feels less alone," he said. She looked at him. "Yes." He held her gaze. "Charlie. I'm going to be here for a while. Not because I'm stuck, I could probably find a way home if I pushed for it. But because this matters. And you matter." He said it the same way he said everything, directly, without armor, the plain truth of it. Whatever that means going forward. Whatever shape it takes. "I'm not going anywhere." Charlie looked at him for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, which was neither dramatic nor performed, just real, the way she was real, warm and certain and over before it had fully registered but absolutely there, undeniably there, the kind of moment that changes the shape of everything that comes after. She pulled back. Her expression was bright and slightly terrified, which he recognized as the face of someone who had just done the brave thing and was waiting to see if it landed. He smiled at her. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she repeated. "Okay," he confirmed. She laughed, the real one, the one from the lobby on the first day, and turned back to look at the city, and leaned against him slightly, and he let her, and for a while they just sat there on the roof of the Hazbin Hotel while hell burned its comfortable ancient fires on every horizon. Down in the lobby, having moved with the particular silence of something that had been eavesdropping as a spiritual practice, Alastair withdrew from the foot of the staircase with his smile at its fullest and his eyes calculating something that he would not share with anyone for quite some time. He had made a contract to protect the hotel. It had seemed like an amusement at the time, Charlie's optimism was entertaining, the souls were diverting company, and the radio demon had learned long ago that the most interesting investments were the ones that looked unlikely. But what had arrived through that ceiling 4 days ago was not something he had calculated for. He tapped his fingers together once, quiet, thoughtful. "Interesting," he said to himself, in the deep register he kept for thoughts he intended to act on eventually. Then he went to make himself a drink, because even the most fascinating developments in the history of hell deserve to be considered with a good glass in hand. Chapter 3, The Ring and the Contract. The conversation with Alastor happened the morning after the rooftop. Izuku had expected it sooner, honestly. The radio demon had been circling the edges of every significant event since Izuku's arrival with the patience of something that had decided to observe before acting, and patience in an entity that old meant something deliberate. Every smile, every pleasantly offered observation, every moment of sardonic commentary had been pieces of an assessment. Izuku had understood this from day 3 and had been conducting his own assessment in return. They met in the hotel's east parlor, which Alastor had apparently claimed for himself by the simple method of spending enough time in it that everyone else had stopped going in. It smelled faintly of old radio static and something that might have been woodsmoke if woodsmoke were alive. Alastor was already seated when Izuku arrived, one leg crossed over the other, holding a glass of something dark, his staff leaning against the chair beside him with the casual placement of a weapon kept within reach at all times. Izuku sat across from him and put his notebook on the table and said nothing. Alastor regarded this with visible appreciation. Most people feel compelled to fill the silence, he said. Most people are uncomfortable with silence, Izuku said. I find it useful. Alastor took a slow sip. You've been here less than a week and you've already rearranged the political landscape of this district more effectively than anything that's happened here in the past 2 decades. I want to understand how you think. I'm happy to talk about that, Izuku said. I'm also interested in understanding what your arrangement with the hotel actually costs. Alastor's smile didn't change, but something behind it did, a fractional adjustment, the recalibration Izuku had caught once before. Direct, the radio demon observed. You've been patient with me because you were evaluating whether I was worth being direct with. I think we're both past that point. A pause. Then Alastor laughed, genuinely, not the performed variety, something briefer and more real. I protected the hotel in exchange for a contract with Charlie, he said. The specifics of that contract are between her and myself. What I will tell you is that I had no expectation, when I made that arrangement, that anything would change the fundamental equation of what this hotel was. A diverting experiment. A pleasant amusement. He looked at Izuku steadily. You changed that equation. How? Because you're not here to be entertained and you're not here to be redeemed and you're not here because you have nowhere else to go. Alastor tilted his head. You're here because you chose it. That is extremely rare in hell. Most souls arrive through consequence. You arrive through something that looks, from certain angles, like intention. I fell through a dimensional rift. And immediately started building something. Alastor waved a hand. The mechanics of arrival are irrelevant. What matters is what you do with the landing. He set down his glass. I want to renegotiate my arrangement with the hotel. Izuku waited. My current contract protects Charlie and the hotel in exchange for certain considerations I won't specify. I want to expand that contract to include, let's call it active cooperation. Not protection. Partnership. Alastor said the word like it was interesting to him precisely because it was unfamiliar. I have resources, influence, and a very thorough knowledge of Hell's infrastructure that your current intelligence gathering hasn't reached yet. In exchange for what? Izuku asked. Access, Alastor said. To whatever you're building. Because you're building something, and I want a seat near the front when it becomes interesting. He smiled. And it will become very interesting. Izuku looked at him for a long moment. You'd want that in writing. Oh, I insist on it. And Charlie sees the full terms before anything is finalized. A brief pause. Naturally. And the original contract, whatever it costs her, gets renegotiated as part of this. Not separately. I want to see the whole picture. The pause this time was longer. Alastor's smile remained precisely in place through all of it, which told Izuku it was the mask rather than the reaction. Then the radio demon picked up his glass again and turned it slowly. You'd negotiate on her behalf. She can negotiate for herself, Izuku said. I'm just making sure she has leverage before she sits down to do it. And what leverage do you think she has that she didn't have before your arrival? Izuku met his eyes. Me. Another silence. Then Alastor laughed again, longer this time, and it was the laugh of something that had been genuinely surprised, which was apparently rare enough that he let it run. Magnificent, he said. Absolutely magnificent. Fine. Renegotiation. Full terms. Charlie present. He raised his glass. I look forward to working with you. Izuku raised an imaginary glass in return. Likewise. He found Vaggie first, because Vaggie would need to know, and because telling Vaggie things before they happened had quickly become the most efficient way to prevent the specific variety of controlled explosions she produced when blindsided. She took it better than expected. Alastor renegotiating, she said slowly, processing. With you as Charlie's backup. Not backup. Context. What's the difference? Backup implies she needs defending. Context means she knows exactly what she's walking into and has chosen her position from full information. He looked at Vaggie. She's capable of handling Alastor. She just shouldn't have to do it alone. Vaggie was quiet for a moment. Something moved through her expression, the particular thing that happened when she was recalibrating a judgment. You know, she said, when you first fell through that ceiling I had you filed under temporary problem. Reasonable assessment. I want it on record that I've updated that assessment. Noted. He paused. For what it's worth, you're the most tactically sound person in this building. Whatever I'm building here, I need someone who can run the operational side of it. Someone who knows the ground and knows how to hold it. Vaggie looked at him with the particular expression of someone who had been competent for a very long time in service of someone else's vision and had not expected to be asked to serve their own. I'm Charlie's. I know that. That doesn't change. He held her gaze. But what I'm talking about is bigger than protecting one person. It's going to need someone who thinks in terms of force projection, territory, and long-term security architecture. That's you. That's exactly you. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, what are you actually planning? Izuku sat down at the table in the training room and opened his notebook to a page that was dense with writing and diagrams and what appeared to be a territorial map of Pentagram City with various notations in the margins. He'd been working on it for 3 days in the small hours after everyone else was asleep. The redemption program is the heart of it, he said. That doesn't change. That's what Charlie built and it's what this entire project means. But a program needs protection. And protection requires territory. And territory in hell requires power. He tapped the map. Right now the hotel exists because Alastor's reputation keeps the worst threats at bay and Charlie's bloodline makes direct assault politically complicated. That's passive defense. It works until it doesn't. So you want active defense. I want the hotel to become something that doesn't need defending because the cost of attacking it is prohibitive. He looked up at her. Not through fear. Through presence. Through being so thoroughly embedded in the structure of this place that removing the hotel would be like removing a load-bearing wall. Vaggie stared at the map. Then she pulled up a chair and sat down. Show me. The renegotiation with Alastor happened 2 days later in the hotel's main dining room, which Nifty had laid out with the careful formality of someone who understood that the aesthetics of a negotiation table mattered. Charlie sat at the center. Vaggie at her right. Izuku at her left. Alastor sat across from them with his staff in one hand and his smile doing its perpetual thing. Husk and Angel Dust were ostensibly not present. They were absolutely present, Husk behind the bar that adjoined the dining room and Angel Dust technically in the hallway except for the 3 sets of arms periodically visible around the door frame. The negotiation took 4 hours. Izuku had never negotiated a contract in Hell before, but the principles weren't different from any high-stakes agreement: identify what each party actually needed, distinguish that from what they said they wanted, find the overlap, and build the terms around the overlap rather than the surface positions. Alastor was brilliant at this, which made him a fascinating opponent, and Izuku found himself genuinely enjoying it in the way he'd always enjoyed problems that required complete presence. The original contract, its specifics still undisclosed but its weight now visible in how carefully Alastor held the terms, was not eliminated. What changed was its context. New clauses were added. New obligations and protections layered over the existing structure. By the time the terms were agreed on, what had been a unilateral deal in Alastor's favor had become something considerably more mutual. "You're good at this," Alastor observed after the agreement was sealed with the particular finality that contracts in Hell carried, a visible thing, a brief light, like a signature made of certainty. "I had good teachers," Izuku said. "The predecessors in your power?" "One of them in particular." He thought of All Might, briefly. "He taught me that the most important negotiations are the ones where both sides leave with what they actually needed. Not what they asked for. What they needed." Alastor looked at him with the considering expression that was his real face's closest equivalent to genuine interest. "And what did I need?" "To be part of something that surprises you," Izuku said. "You're bored." "Not obviously, you perform not bored very well. But you've been in Hell for a very long time doing more or less the same things for more or less the same reasons. You backed the hotel initially because it was diverting. But what I'm building here is going to be genuinely new, and you know it, and that's what you actually came to the table for." A long silence. Alastor turned his glass slowly. "And you're not concerned," he said, "that partnering with the radio demon carries certain risks." "Every worthwhile partnership carries risks," Izuku said. "The question is whether the value is commensurate." "In your case, yes." "Clearly yes." Alastor smiled, and this time it was the real version, or the closest to it Izuku had seen. "Magnificent," he said quietly, for the second time, and it sounded like something he kept for very specific moments. Charlie, sitting between them, looked from one to the other with an expression that contained approximately equal parts relief, pride, and the slightly stunned quality of someone watching two very different powerful things find a frequency. "So," she said. "Are we done threatening each other?" "I wasn't threatening anyone, my dear," Alastor said pleasantly. "Neither was I," Izuku said. Charlie looked at both of them. "That was somehow worse," she said. 3 weeks passed. They were the most productive 3 weeks Izuku had experienced since the period of his most intensive training, and the most complicated emotionally since, genuinely, he wasn't sure there was a comparison. Hell moved fast when it moved, and the hotel was moving. Nifty's intake framework went operational. The first 3 new residents arrived, genuine souls who had heard about the angel dust showcase through Vox's own network broadcasting it and had made their way to the hotel with the careful hope of people who had been told for a long time that they had no options. Vaggie ran their initial assessments with the kind of structured thoroughness that produced immediate visible results. The program had teeth now. It had shape. The political landscape shifted visibly. Vox went quiet, not retreating, recalculating. The public defeat of his contracted heavies had rippled through the Overlord network in exactly the way Izuku had intended, and the ripple had carried a specific message: the hotel was no longer a soft target. Other Overlords, watching, adjusted their positions by degrees. Some sent cautious overtures. One sent a threatening message that Izuku read, placed carefully in his files, and didn't respond to, which sent its own message. Through all of it, he and Charlie grew into something that neither of them had named yet but which had become structural to both their days. Morning coffee on the hotel roof had become a habit. He told her about Japan, his mother, his training, the long road to One for All, the terror and wonder of the first time he'd run the power at full and understood what he'd been given. She told him about growing up the daughter of Lucifer, about the enormous loneliness of believing in something nobody else believed, about the weight of a dream that everyone assured you was naive. They talked like people who had been saving these conversations for the right person. One evening, for weeks after his arrival, he was in the workshop Nifty had helped him set up in the basement, working on the structural problem of how to reinforce the hotel against the kind of assault Heaven had deployed once and would deploy again, when Charlie appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs and an expression he'd learned to read as "I've been thinking about something and I've decided to say it out loud." "Hey," she said. "Hey." He made room at the workbench. She set down the mugs and leaned against the bench and looked at his work, the schematics, the material calculations, the territorial maps with new notations from Vaggy's latest intelligence reports. She'd gotten good at reading his work surfaces the way he'd gotten good at reading her expressions. "You've been here a month," she said. 31 days. "Do you still think about going home?" He considered the honest answer. "I think about my mother," he said. "And Achiko, and Ida. I think about them being worried." He looked at his hands. "But every time I start building a serious plan to find a way back, he stopped. "You what?" "I think about what I'd be leaving," he said. "And I can't make the math work." Charlie was quiet for a moment. "There might be a way to communicate across the dimensional barrier," she said. "My father has abilities that, we could try. I should have suggested it sooner." "It would help," he said. "Letting them know I'm alive and okay." He looked at her. "It wouldn't change the rest of it." "No. No." She looked at him steadily. Something in her expression was doing the layered thing again, and this time he didn't wait to name it because they were past the point where leaving things unnamed served either of them. "Charlie," he said. "I want to be here. Not because I'm stuck. Not because the project needs me, though it does. Because I want to be where you are." He held her gaze. "That's been true for a while now and I think you know it." "I know it," she said quietly. "I know what I'm asking. You're the princess of hell. The daughter of Lucifer. Whatever we are is, complicated, politically and practically." "Everything about my life is complicated politically and practically," she said. "That's not a reason." "No," he agreed. "It's not." He reached into the pocket of his jacket, which made Charlie tilt her head slightly because the gesture was specific, and when he opened his hand what was sitting in it was a ring. Not a found ring, he'd made it. 3 weeks ago, with Nifty's help and a quiet conversation with Husk who had known someone in the metalworking district, using materials from Hell's own forges that carried a permanence beyond what Earth metals had. Simple. A green-tinted metal that caught light the same way One for All's lightning did, with a small inlaid stone that was a deep natural amber from the outer ring deposits. It was a craftsman's ring, not a jeweler's, precise and personal rather than ornate. Charlie looked at it. Then at him. Then at it again. "Izuku," she said. "I've thought about this," he said. "Not impulsively. You know I don't do things impulsively. I thought about it from the second week and I've been refining the thinking every day since." He met her eyes. "You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. You have a dream that should be impossible and you're making it real through sheer refusal to accept that it isn't. You're kind in the way that takes real courage, not the easy kind. And you make me want to build things I've never thought to build before." He paused. "I want to build them with you. Officially. Permanently. Whatever that means in hell, I want it." Charlie stared at the ring for a long, long moment. Her jaw was doing the thing it did when she was preventing herself from crying preemptively out of sheer force of will. "This is the most prepared proposal I have ever heard," she said, voice slightly unsteady. "You've heard others." "I've imagined them." She looked at him. Her eyes were very bright. "Yes," she said. "Obviously yes. Completely, entirely, without any reservation, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and she grabbed him by the front of his jacket and kissed him the way the first time had been a prelude to, properly, fully, with the certainty of something that had been decided and intended and was now simply, finally, real. Upstairs, through 2 floors of ceiling, a sound began that was specifically nifty, having heard through means that were probably supernatural and were definitely intentional, and then Angel Dust shouting something with a profanity count that suggested he was crying, and Husk saying gruffly that he'd had a feeling, and Vaggy's voice, quiet and genuine, "Good. That's good." Charlie pulled back with a laugh that was also a little bit a cry and looked at the ring on her hand. "It glows," she said. "It actually glows." "One for all residue in the metal," he said. "It'll do that when you're near me." She looked at the ring. At him. Back at the ring. "We need to tell my father," she said. "I know. He can be a lot." "Charlie," Izuku said patiently. "I've been in hell for a month. I've fought Overlord-class demons in the street and renegotiated a contract with the radio demon and fought off 47 armed soldiers before breakfast. I think I can handle your father." She gave him the look that was equal parts affection and the patient acknowledgement that he was wrong about this specific thing. "You can't," she said fondly. "But it's very sweet that you think you can." Lucifer arrived the following afternoon and he was, as promised, a lot. He was also, and Izuku noted this the way he noted everything, systematically and without the emotional reaction that most people would have had, carrying a grief so deeply worn into him that it had become part of his structure, the way old injuries change how a person stands. The grief of Lilith's absence. Charlie had explained this carefully, and Izuku had listened carefully, and what he understood was that Lucifer loved his daughter with the fierceness of someone who had failed many things but refused to fail this one. The first 3 minutes were Lucifer being Lucifer, the energy, the hats that appeared from nowhere, the slightly manic brightness of someone who had been alone for too long and used performance to cover it. He barely looked at Izuku. He was too busy looking at Charlie, cataloging her the way parents catalog children they've been worried about. Then he looked at Izuku. Izuku looked back. "So," Lucifer said. "So," Izuku agreed. "You're the human." He said it the way Zestial had, not dismissively, but with the particular emphasis of something verifying a fact it found unusual. "I am." "Who fell through my daughter's ceiling?" 4 floors, Izuku confirmed. "I repaired them." "I saw." "Good work." Lucifer's eyes moved to Charlie's hand. "To the ring." Something moved through his expression, complicated, parental, layered with the particular cocktail of feelings that belong to a parent watching their child claim something important. "You built that yourself?" "Yes." "Hell-forged metal?" "Yes." Lucifer was quiet for a moment. He turned the small figure he was holding over in his hands, a rubber duck, which Charlie had explained was a thing and Izuku had accepted was a thing. "You have a plan," he said. "Not a question." "Several," Izuku said. "For the hotel's protection, for the program's expansion, for the political stability of this district. Long-term and short-term." He paused. "Charlie is the center of all of it. Not as a resource. As the reason." Lucifer looked at him for a long time. "Everyone who has ever wanted something from Charlie has made similar speeches," he said. "I know," Izuku said. "You should be skeptical. A strange being shows up through a dimensional accident and within a month is proposing to your daughter. Skepticism is correct." He met Lucifer's eyes. "What I can offer is that I'm not going to hide what I am or diminish what I intend. I intend to stay. I intend to build something here that makes this place genuinely safer for what she's trying to do. And I intend to spend a very long time making sure she knows that the choice she made was right." A very long pause. Then Lucifer turned to Charlie. "He's very intense," he said. "He is," Charlie agreed warmly. "Do you like that?" "Very much." Lucifer turned back to Izuku. His expression had shifted, still complex, still layered, but carrying now the particular quality of a parent who has made a decision and intends to stand by it. Hurt her, he said quietly, and there was nothing theatrical in it, and there is no corner of any dimension you could reach that I wouldn't. Understood, Izuku said. And agreed. Another pause. Then Lucifer straightened, smiled with the abrupt shift of energy that was apparently his baseline social mode, and said, "Great," with a brightness that contained only 70% emotional management. "Let's have dinner. I want to hear about this plan. All of it. I have opinions." "I expected you would," Izuku said. The wedding happened 2 weeks later. Not a small wedding, nothing involving the Princess of Hell and a dimensional anomaly with the accumulated power of 9 people was going to be small, particularly not with Nifty in charge of event logistics. She'd been vibrating with organizational purpose for 14 days straight and had produced something that was, in the assessment of everyone present, somewhere between a royal ceremony and the best party Hell had seen in several decades. Pentagram City noticed. You couldn't miss it, the hotel lit up, the crowd that gathered, the obvious significance of the occasion. Vox's screens, because Vox's screens never missed significant events regardless of his feelings about them, carried the broadcast. Every overlord in the Pride Ring either sent a representative or was watching through someone who did. Charlie wore red, because of course she did, and she looked like the Princess of Hell choosing to be exactly that, which was different from and considerably more powerful than the Princess of Hell being defined by it. She walked through the hotel's front doors and into the plaza where Izuku was waiting with the kind of certainty that made everyone watching feel it. Izuku wore green. The full cowl wasn't active but its presence was there at the edges, the faint ghost of lightning visible around his hands for people who knew to look, his posture carrying the ease of something that had chosen to be exactly where it was. He watched her come toward him and something settled in his chest with the quiet permanence of a foundation being poured. Alastair officiated, which had been Charlie's idea and which Alastair had accepted with such instantaneous enthusiasm that it was clear he'd been hoping to be asked. He performed the ceremony with the theatrical precision of something born for audience work and the specific warmth of something that, underneath all the performance, genuinely wished them well in its own complicated way. The vows were their own. Izuku had written his in the workshop at 4 a.m, discarding 11 drafts before reaching something true enough. I found you at the bottom of a fall, and I understood immediately what you were trying to do and why it mattered. I've built things my whole life, not structures, but possibilities. The possibility that people can be better than their worst moments. That what you choose is more real than what you were born into. You've been building the same thing longer than I've been here, in harder conditions, with less support. I want to be your support. Completely and permanently and without qualification. Whatever this place demands, whatever the cost, I'm here. I chose this. I choose you. Charlie's vows made 3 people cry. One of them was Angel Dust, who was very loudly not crying while crying. One of them was Nifty, who was simultaneously crying and straightening a crooked flower arrangement. One of them was Lucifer, who was managing it with the dignity of someone who had decided that dignity was for this particular moment not worth the effort. When Alastair said the words that sealed the vow, in the particular register that made contracts in Hell real, the green ring on Charlie's hand pulsed once, a bright warm flash, and the whole plaza saw it. In the crowd, among the people from the surrounding blocks who'd come to watch the Princess of Hell marry someone who'd fallen through her ceiling a month ago, there was a moment of perfect collective stillness. Then noise, real noise, not polite noise, the kind that comes from people who are feeling something they didn't expect to feel. Vaggie, standing at Charlie's side through the ceremony, looked at Izuku when it was done with the expression of someone who had completed a thorough and extended assessment and arrived at a final verdict. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The look said it, the way the best communications always said things, I've decided you're worth it. Don't make me wrong. He nodded, once. She nodded back. And that was the compact, not ceremonial, not formal, but absolutely real. In the hotel that night, after the crowd had thinned and the music had moved inside and the city had returned to its usual ancient hum, Izuku stood at the window of the room that was now theirs with the lights of Pentagram City spreading out below. Charlie appeared beside him with 2 glasses and handed one over and leaned into his side. "So," she said. "What do we call it?" "Call what?" "What you're building." She looked up at him. "It needs a name. Something is only real when it has a name." He'd been thinking about this for days, turning it over the way he turned over problems, from multiple angles, testing weight and fit. Not a title. Not a claim. Something that described what it actually was, a thing built from choice rather than inheritance, from will rather than birthright, in a place that wasn't supposed to be capable of this kind of growth. "The Verdant Dynasty," he said. Charlie was quiet for a moment. "Verdant," she repeated. "Green. Everything I have comes from green. One for all's lightning. The ring. The notebooks." He looked at the city. "But verdant also means, living. Growing. Something that keeps producing." He looked at her. "That's what this is. Not a conquest. A living thing." Charlie turned the words over. Then she smiled, the small real one, and leaned her head against his shoulder and looked out at hell with the expression of someone standing at the beginning of something very large and being, for the first time, entirely unafraid of the size of it. "The Verdant Dynasty," she said. "I like it." Outside, the ancient fires of hell burned on. But somewhere in their light, if you were standing at exactly the right window, you could see something new beginning to cast its own. Chapter 4, Roots and Teeth. The first thing the Verdant Dynasty needed was a flag. Nifty decided this at breakfast approximately 72 hours after the wedding, presenting the argument with the energy of someone who had been building to it for longer than 72 hours and had simply been waiting for the correct moment to deploy it. Her reasoning was sound. Legitimacy required symbols, symbols required deliberate creation, and if they didn't create their own symbols then Vox's network would create symbols for them, and those symbols would be unflattering. Izuku agreed immediately, which made Nifty produce a folder of 17 draft designs she'd already prepared. "You had these before you made the argument," Vaggie observed. "Obviously," Nifty said. They settled on the 3rd design, a stylized green lightning bolt, vertical, crossed at the base by the curved line of a horizon, on a deep crimson field. Charlie's red and Izuku's green. Simple enough to be reproduced, distinctive enough to be unmistakable. It was flying from the hotel's roofline by that afternoon. Pentagram City noticed. Flags meant statements, and statements in hell were either backed by something real or they were invitations. Within 48 hours of the flag going up, 3 things happened. 2 minor overlords sent cautious diplomatic messages through intermediaries, 1 mid-tier demon threw a rock through the hotel's east window, and Zestial appeared again at the front door with the unhurried air of someone who had been tracking a trajectory and had arrived to verify it was heading where he'd calculated. The flag was bold, he told Izuku in the parlor over tea. Bold was intentional, Izuku said. There are those who will interpret boldness as aggression. There are those who would interpret any sign of life as aggression, Izuku said. That's not a reason to stop breathing. Zestial was quiet for a moment, turning his teacup. The elder overlords have been watching since the wedding. There is discussion. He paused. Not all of it hostile. And the hostile portion? There is an entity named Carmilla Carmine, Zestial said carefully. She is, not aggressive by nature. But she is protective. Fiercely so. She has daughters. She built an armor empire in the Greed Ring precisely to keep her family insulated from the kind of power politics that swallowed everything around her. He met Izuku's eyes. She is concerned that what you are building will eventually require tribute or allegiance from her territory. I'm not building an empire that runs on tribute, Izuku said. I know that, Zestial said. You will need to convince her. Arrange the meeting, Izuku said. I'll bring Charlie. Zestial nodded. Then, rising to leave with the patient deliberateness that was his mode of movement, there is one more thing. A name is moving through the networks. Not through Vox's channels, through older ones. There is something watching your dynasty from heaven that is not the exorcists. He paused at the doorway. Something that wears patience the way I wear patience. Which should concern you. After he left, Izuku sat with that for a moment and then added it to his notebook under a section he'd labeled incoming and underlined it twice. The expansion of the hotel began not through acquisition but through connection. This had been Izuku's thesis from the start, that the Verdant dynasty's power should grow the way roots grew, spreading through the ground rather than across the surface, making it structurally impossible to dislodge without destroying everything it had grown through. Territory in Hell was typically held by force. He intended to hold it by relevance. The first step was the workshop district 2 blocks east. A collection of craftsmen and small-scale operations that had been slowly getting squeezed by a mid-tier demon named Forez, who was neither powerful nor intelligent but was persistent in the way that mediocre bullies were persistent, which was to say constantly and boringly. Forez had been extracting levies from the workshop district for 3 years. The craftsmen paid because the alternative was worse. Izuku walked into the district on a Tuesday with Vaggie and spent 4 hours talking to every craftsman who would talk to him, asking what they made and how and what they needed. He bought things. Paid fair prices. Asked good questions. Listened to the answers. By the end of 4 hours the district knew his face and understood, in the wordless way that communities understand shifts in power, that something had changed about the calculus of their situation. Then he found Forez. The demon was exactly what Izuku had mapped him as, physically capable but intellectually limited, running on the confidence of unchallenged small-scale dominance. He had 4 associates and a territorial claim that was legally dubious by Hell's own standards. Izuku presented him with a document Alastair had helped draft, which outlined clearly that the workshop district now fell within the Verdant dynasty's sphere of influence, that the levies Forez had been collecting were terminated, and that Forez was welcome to take his territorial claim to whatever legal process Hell maintained if he believed he had grounds. Forez looked at the document. At Izuku. At Vaggie, who was standing to Izuku's right with the particular stillness that preceded decisive action. At the faint ghost of green lightning that was threading lazily through Izuku's fingers. Forez left the district within the hour. He would not return. The craftsman sent a delegation to the hotel the following morning. Not tribute, the distinction was important and Izuku made it clearly. An alliance. Mutual benefit. The hotel provided protection and trade access and political cover. The craftsman provided materials, labor, and the particular legitimacy of being genuinely useful to the people around them. Nifty wept tears of pure organizational joy and immediately began building an economic network chart that covered an entire wall of her office. Vaggie watched the network grow with the focused attention of someone who was simultaneously reassured by its strength and alert to its vulnerabilities. She and Izuku had developed a working rhythm over the past weeks that suited both their natures. He laid out the strategic vision, she interrogated every assumption until the ones that survived were genuine, and they both moved faster than they would have separately. She'd stopped pretending that she was uncertain about him at some point in the second week after the wedding, though she maintained the performance of skepticism because she found it useful. The Carmilla meeting, she said one evening over the territorial map. What's your read on her? Smart. Careful. Loves her family the way you love Charlie, Izuku said. Which means she'll be hostile until she understands that I'm not a threat to what she's built, and after that she'll be one of the most reliable allies we have. How do you know the second part? Because people who build things to protect what they love recognize other people who are doing the same thing. It's a specific frequency. He looked at Vaggie. Same way you recognized it. She made the face she made when he said something accurate that she hadn't prepared a deflection for. I didn't say I recognized anything. You don't have to say it. She threw a pen at him. He caught it without looking. Angel dust was the dynasty's first surprise. Not that he'd become important, that had been visible from the start, in the particular way that people who have survived a great deal and kept moving become important to any enterprise that's paying attention. The surprise was the form it took. 3 weeks after the wedding, Valentino made a move. Not a violent move. Valentino was too intelligent for a direct assault on something that had demonstrated what the hotel had demonstrated. His move was legal, or the hell equivalent of legal, which was to say it was a contract claim. Angel Dust's existing contract with Valentino had terms that, when Alastor reviewed them, his expression doing the thing it did when something offended his professional sensibilities, were exploitative by any reasonable standard, including hell's. But they were binding, and they included a reclamation clause that Valentino was now invoking, and the substance of the claim was that Angel Dust, as Valentino's contracted asset, could not establish permanent residence in a competing enterprise. Angel Dust had known this was coming. Izuku understood that from the way Angel took the news, not shocked, just braced. The particular posture of someone who had been waiting for a consequence they'd been pretending wasn't coming. He can't actually do anything, Angel said in the hotel common room, arms folded, tone carefully casual. It's just pressure. It's a valid contract claim, Alastor said, reading the document with the expression of a surgeon examining a poorly performed operation. The language is aggressive but technically, I know what the language is, Angel said sharply. Silence. Izuku had been sitting at the other end of the table. He'd been listening with the focused attention he applied to things that were more complicated than they appeared, and what he'd been tracking wasn't the legal language. It was the thing underneath Angel Dust's carefully maintained composure. The tight quality of his breathing. The way he was looking at the table rather than at the document or at any of the people in the room. Angel, Izuku said. I'm fine. I know you're fine. I want to know what you need. Angel looked at him. There was something unguarded in it, a flash, brief, of something that had been behind the performance all along. I need Valentino to not have a claim on me, he said. That's what I need. Have needed for, he stopped. Looked back at the table. A while. Okay, Izuku said. Then that's what we fix. It's not fixable. The contract is, contracts can be challenged, broken, or superseded, Izuku said. Alastor, I'm already looking, Alastor said, turning a page with the focused energy of someone who had just found the problem interesting. The reclamation clause has a counter-provision that Valentino almost certainly didn't intend to include when he drafted this. It requires the contracted party to have vacated the competing enterprise voluntarily. If the residence is established under a higher-tier dynastic claim, the dynasty can file a counterclaim, Vaggie said, arriving at the same point from the tactical direction. The Verdant dynasty as a recognized power structure supersedes Valentino's individual contract if we establish prior dynastic claim to Angel's residence. Is that a real thing? Charlie asked. It is now, Alastor said, with the particular satisfaction of someone creating a legal precedent in real time. Hell's contract law has sufficient ambiguity in the dynastic status section to make a strong argument. I can have the filing prepared by morning. Angel Dust had gone very still during this exchange. He was looking at Izuku with an expression that was trying to be none of the things it was, which were, surprised, relieved, uncertain, and somewhere underneath all of that, something that was much older and much more careful, the expression of someone who had been failed by enough people that they had stopped expecting anything different. You do that, he said. Not a question. You're part of this, Izuku said simply. That means this goes to bat for you. That's what it means to be part of something. I've been, Angel started, then stopped. Tried again. I'm not exactly the poster child for, Angel. Izuku looked at him steadily. I know what you've been. I know what you've survived. I also know what you're building into. Those aren't contradictions. They're a history. He held Angel Dust's eyes. You're ours. The contract gets broken. A long, specific silence. Husk, behind the bar, was looking at his glass with the careful attention of someone who was feeling something he didn't want to perform publicly. Charlie had her hand over her mouth. Nifty had stopped moving, which was notable. I'm going to act like this is a normal business decision, Angel Dust said finally, voice doing something uneven on the last two words. Good idea, Izuku agreed. And I'm not going to do whatever you think I'm going to do. Of course not. I'm absolutely not going to. He stopped, pressed his palm briefly over his eyes, cry. I'm not doing that. That's not happening. Obviously not, Husk said from the bar, and refilled his own glass. The contract challenge was filed the following morning. Valentino screamed about it through intermediaries for 4 days, escalated it twice, and then dropped the claim when Alastair personally communicated that the radio demon's involvement in the dynasty meant that pursuing the claim would generate certain costs that Valentino's current contract portfolio could not absorb. Valentino dropped it. He didn't forget it, which Izuku had expected and noted, but the immediate crisis was resolved and what remained was the fact of it, the Verdant dynasty had gone to bat for one of its own and won. The hotel felt different after that. Something settled into its bones that hadn't been there before, the particular solidity of a place where people knew they'd be defended. The Carmilla meeting happened on a Thursday, in neutral territory, a restaurant in the upper district of the Pride Ring that was old enough to predate most of the overlords currently operating and had therefore accumulated the particular authority that comes from simply surviving everything. Carmilla arrived with both her daughters, Odette and Clara, and the composed precision of someone who had prepared for multiple outcomes and intended to reach the one she'd chosen. She was not what Izuku had expected visually, which was useful information about his own assumptions. Quiet. Controlled. The kind of person whose stillness was not passivity but the conservation of energy for moments that required it. Her daughters were both more expressive and more curious, Odette watching with careful assessment and Clara barely hiding her interest in the green lightning traces that Izuku hadn't bothered to fully suppress. Charlie led the opening, which had been the plan. Charlie's natural warmth was the most efficient way to demonstrate in the first 3 minutes that this wasn't a hostile meeting. She was good at this in ways that Izuku had been watching and cataloging with deep admiration. Her optimism wasn't a tactic, it was genuine, but she'd learned to deploy its genuineness with the precision of someone who understood exactly what it communicated. Carmilla listened. Watched Charlie. Watched Izuku. Watched how they moved relative to each other, the small natural adjustments, the way information passed between them without words. Reading the relationship with the accuracy of someone who understood relationships as security variables. You built the armor trade because your daughters needed protection, Izuku said after the initial conversation had established its rhythm. And because you understood that independent economic power was the only real insulation from political leverage in hell. Carmilla looked at him steadily. Yes. That's exactly what we're building, he said. Not armor. But the same principle. A structure that's valuable enough to the surrounding ecosystem that attacking it costs more than it gains. He looked at her. We're not going to ask for tribute, allegiance, or access to your trade network. What we're asking is an understanding, that the dynasty and Carmilla's operation are compatible entities. That we share a general interest in hell not being run entirely by the loudest and most aggressive voices in the room. Carmilla was quiet for a moment. Vox, she said. And whatever heaven sends next, Izuku agreed. Something moved in Carmilla's expression. The first real movement, a shift, small but significant, from assessment to consideration. She turned to Charlie. The redemption program, she said. My daughters have expressed interest in what it could mean for the Greed Ring. We're expanding, Charlie said. Not just the Pride Ring. The program should reach every ring eventually. Carmilla looked at her daughters. Odette was doing the face of someone who had been hoping this would go this way. Clara was no longer pretending not to be interested. Clara has been considering, Carmilla started carefully. Mom, Clara said. She's considering the program, Carmilla said, and there was something in her voice that was very carefully composed around the edges of something much more tender. For herself. The silence that followed was the meaningful kind. Then she's welcome, Charlie said immediately, and the warmth in it was real and absolute. Carmilla looked at Charlie for a long moment. Then, with the particular movement of someone who has made a decision they've been approaching from 3 directions, an understanding, then. As you described. She extended a hand. The Carmine family and the Verdant dynasty operate without interference. Charlie shook it. Izuku nodded. Odette was smiling. Clara was looking at the table with the particular brightness of someone whose path had just gotten slightly less impossible. On the way back to the hotel, Charlie slipped her hand into Izuku's and leaned into him briefly. Clara's going to be good for the program, she said quietly. She's already good, Izuku said. She just needs someone to reflect that back at her. Charlie looked at him sideways. You do that, she said. For everyone. You know that. Do what? Reflect back what's already there. Make people see it. She paused. You did it for me, that first week. I was so tired of being the only one who believed this was possible. And then you just, she squeezed his hand, you saw it. Exactly as it was. Not smaller than it was. It's as big as it is, he said. I just have accurate vision. She laughed at that, quietly, and they walked back through Pentagram City under the bruised purple sky with the dynasty's flag visible from 4 blocks away, flying steady and greenlit above the hotel roofline. The first real crisis hit on a Friday night. It came from inside, which is where the important crises always come from. 3 new hotel residents, souls who'd been in the program for 2 weeks, showing genuine engagement, genuine effort, were found to have been sending reports to Vox's intelligence network. Not maliciously, exactly. The details emerged over a painful evening conversation that Vaggie ran with the focused precision of someone who understood that anger without clarity was useless. They were scared. They'd been told, by one of Vox's intermediaries who'd gotten to them before they arrived at the hotel, that if they didn't report what they saw they'd lose whatever protection they had outside. They had families outside. People they were still connected to, in the fragile way the dead remain connected to what they loved. Izuku sat in the corner of the room while Vaggie worked through it and didn't intervene, because it wasn't his conversation to lead. He watched. When Vaggie had the full picture and the room had gone from tense to the particular exhausted stillness of truth that's been said out loud, he leaned forward. What did you report? He asked. Not angry. Practical. The 3 souls exchanged looks. The event planning for the showcase. Nifty's intake numbers. The Carmilla meeting. One of them hesitated. And that you were going to meet with someone named Zestial again this week. Izuku nodded. None of it was catastrophic. The intake numbers were already partially public. The showcase information was irrelevant after the fact. The Carmilla meeting's outcome was going to be visible anyway. The Zestial meeting, that one was mildly significant, but manageable. Okay, he said. Here's what happens now. You 3 are going to stay in the program. You're going to keep reporting to Vox's people. Vaggie turned to him with an expression. Except that what you report will be what we give you to report, he said. Vox wants intelligence from inside the hotel. We want Vox confident he has intelligence from inside the hotel. Both of those things can be true simultaneously. The 3 souls stared at him. Charlie, sitting beside him, looked at the 3 of them with the expression that was her real face, not the performance of forgiveness, because she didn't need to perform it, just the actual thing. You were protecting your families, she said. That's not a sin. That's love. She looked at each of them. But you're also ours now. And ours means we protect your families too. She glanced at Izuku. It means that, he confirmed. Vaggie will work out the details of how. Vaggie, from the chair where she'd been conducting the investigation, looked at the ceiling briefly with the expression of someone cataloging exactly how much additional work had just appeared on her schedule. Then she looked at the 3 souls. Tomorrow morning, she said. We figure out who Vox's intermediary is and how to make sure your families stop being leverage. Come find me after breakfast. The three souls left with the specific posture of people who had been expecting one thing and received something so different from it that their body language hadn't fully updated yet. After they were gone, Vaggie turned to Izuku. "You're going to feed Vox disinformation." "Selective information," he said. "There's a difference. Disinformation is a lie. What I'm planning is more, narrative management. We let him think he knows more than he does. We shape what he's confident about. And then when he moves based on that confidence, he moves wrong," Vaggie finished. "He moves exactly where we need him to move." Izuku looked at the map on the table. Vox's media network is his weapon and his vulnerability. He needs to be right because his entire power base is built on appearing to know more than everyone else. If we can make him look wrong publicly, not through a fight, through his own intelligence failing him in front of an audience, it cracks the network, Vaggie said slowly. "Not the technology. The trust in it." "Yes." Vaggie stared at the map for a long moment. "You've been planning this since the three of them were caught." "I've been planning it since we identified that Vox's play was always intelligence-based," Izuku said. "I just needed the right channel." She shook her head slowly, not in disagreement but in the particular acknowledgement of someone who has just watched a plan come into focus from a direction they hadn't anticipated. "All right," she said. "What do you need from me?" The weeks that followed had a building quality, the sense of something accumulating that Izuku recognized from the long training periods of his life, each day adding to the previous, the total growing not through dramatic moments but through consistent direction. The dynasty's territory expanded through the alliance model, the bakery district near the hotel's north side, a small publishing operation that Alastor found useful and therefore introduced, a medical practice run by a soul who had been a surgeon in life and found in the program the framework to start being one again. Charlie's program grew with the territory. 3 residents became 8, 8 became 14, and the quality of the work, the actual change in the souls who were going through it, was becoming impossible to dismiss. Nifty's tracking systems were meticulous. Progress was documented. Setbacks were documented. The picture that emerged was genuinely complicated and genuinely hopeful in the specific combination that made it credible rather than propaganda. Clara Carmine arrived on a Wednesday morning with one small bag and the expression of someone who had made a decision and was not interested in performing uncertainty about it. She shook Izuku's hand at the door. She hugged Charlie, which surprised her. She looked around the hotel lobby with the particular attention of someone who was trying to understand a place by its atmosphere rather than its appearance. "It feels different in here," she said. "Different how?" Charlie asked. Clara thought about it. "Like something is trying," she said. "You can feel it." Izuku thought that was probably the most accurate description of what they were building that he'd heard from outside it. That night, late, he was on the roof. The city below had taken on the rhythm he'd come to know, the particular pulse of Pentagram City's nightlife, the distant bass of music from the entertainment districts, the occasional flash of demon-category violence in the far eastern blocks that he'd been gradually developing a plan to address. Charlie was asleep. He'd stayed up because Zestial's warning about the heaven-adjacent watcher had been sitting in the back of his mind for 3 weeks with the particular quality of a thing that hadn't moved yet but would. He looked up at the sky. In the purple dark of hell's sky, nothing looked back. But something about the dark felt attentive. He'd been in this world long enough that his instincts had started to calibrate to it. And what his instincts were telling him, quietly but with increasing clarity, was that Vox was a present problem but a manageable one. The incoming thing, whatever Zestial had sensed, whatever was wearing patience like an old coat and watching from heaven's architecture, was the future problem. The real one. He opened his notebook to the section marked incoming and underneath the double underlined entry, he wrote a single line: "They'll move when the dynasty is large enough to threaten their narrative. Not before. So the window is, keep building until the confrontation is on our terms." He underlined it once. Below him, the hotel breathed with the particular warmth of a place where people were sleeping safely, and the flag above him moved in the thermal currents that rose from hell's ever-burning depths, and the green in it glowed faintly against the dark like something that had decided to be alive and was not interested in negotiating the point. The verdant dynasty was growing. And whatever was watching from heaven was going to have to decide, eventually, whether to watch it grow or try to stop it. Izuku was ready for either answer. Chapter 5, When Heaven Moves. The message arrived on a Monday. It didn't come through a messenger or a diplomatic channel or any of the established methods that Hell's various powers used when they wanted to communicate formally. It came through the sky, literally through the sky, burning downward through the purple atmosphere of the Pride Ring like a comet with a destination, and it hit the plaza in front of the Hazbin Hotel and left a scorch mark in the shape of a perfect circle, and in the center of the circle was a single white feather that hadn't burned. Izuku picked it up. Turned it over. The feather was warm and it hummed at a frequency he could feel in his back teeth and along the channels where One for All ran. Heaven, Vaggie said from 2 steps behind him, her voice doing the specific tight thing it did when the past arrived uninvited. Heaven, he confirmed. He brought it inside and Alastair examined it with the expression of a sommelier identifying a year, turning it slowly under the parlor light while the rest of the hotel's residents assembled with the particular speed of people who had learned that unusual things deserved full attention. Sarah, Alastair said finally. This is her signature. The resonance is distinctive. He set the feather down with a care that said more about what it represented than about the object itself. The head of the seraphim. Heaven's administrative authority. He smiled pleasantly. She doesn't send feathers to things she considers inconsequential. What does it mean? Charlie asked. It means she wants a conversation, Izuku said, reading the energy of it the way he'd learned to read power signatures. On her terms. At a location of her choosing. He looked at Alastair. Can you read where? There's a convergence point 3 kilometers north, Alastair said. The old barrier seam, where heaven and hell's dimensional fabric runs thin. She wants to meet there. He paused. It's neutral ground, technically. Also technically the most surveilled location in the Pride Ring. She wants witnesses, Vaggie said. She wants the meeting on record, Izuku corrected. That's different. If she wanted to act aggressively she wouldn't announce herself. She's being careful. He turned the feather over once more and set it down. Which means she's been watching us long enough to decide we're worth being careful about. Charlie was looking at the feather with an expression that was processing several things simultaneously. Sarah runs heaven. She signed off on the exterminations. She stopped. The history was layered and sharp. I know, Izuku said. He looked at her. Do you want to come? Obviously, Charlie said, with enough steel in the one word that nobody felt the need to debate it. They went the following morning, Izuku, Charlie, and Vaggie, with Alastair declining to attend on the grounds that his presence at a meeting with Heaven's head seraphim would complicate rather than clarify, and with the additional note, delivered with his usual pleasantness, that he would be monitoring the convergence point through other means. Husk had said nothing except to put a full bottle on the bar, pour 3 glasses, and leave them there until they came back. The convergence point was an old overpass that had half collapsed at some point in Hell's long history, its structure suspended between 2 buildings in a way that made no architectural sense but persisted anyway, which was accurate to Hell's general relationship with physics. The air there was different, thinner, with a quality like the moment before a thunderstorm, and the light had a white tinge that came from nowhere visible. Sarah was already there. She was tall in the way that made you recalibrate your sense of scale, not aggressively large but carrying the presence of something that had stood at the top of a very long hierarchy for a very long time. Gold-winged, white-robed, and carrying herself with the composed authority of someone who had made enormous decisions and had been carrying the weight of them long enough that the weight had become posture. She was looking at Izuku when they arrived. Not at Charlie. At Izuku. So this is what fell through the barrier, she said. Izuku Midoriya, he said. Most people call me Deku. I know what people call you, Sarah said. I've been watching you for 11 weeks. She looked at him with the particular attention of someone used to reading power in beings. You carry something that shouldn't exist. Not here. Not anywhere in this cosmology. One for all, he said. It's from my world. Your world has no hell. No heaven. No, this. She gestured at the ambient reality around them. What you carry is 9 people's worth of accumulated ability operating in a dimensional framework it wasn't built for. She paused. It should have degraded. It hasn't. No, Izuku agreed. It hasn't. Something moved in Sarah's expression. Not alarm, something more like the recognition of a thing she'd been avoiding concluding. You're a variable we didn't account for, she said. I'm aware. The dynasty you've built in 11 weeks is significant. The political realignment, the expansion, the alliance network. She looked at Charlie, who held her gaze without flinching. And you've been running the redemption program with genuine results. That particular sentence carried a weight Izuku catalogued immediately. She hadn't expected genuine results. She'd been watching for the program to fail, because failure confirmed the framework she'd been operating from. Genuine results disrupted something structural in her understanding. That surprises you, Charlie said. It wasn't aggressive. It was just honest. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said, which appeared to cost her something to say. It surprises me. The extermination, Charlie said. Steady. You signed off on it. The yearly culls. All of it. Yes. And now you're here because we've become inconvenient. I'm here, Sarah said carefully, because what you've built is about to become a point of crisis regardless of what I do, and I would rather be part of the conversation before the crisis than after. She looked at Izuku. There are those in heaven who will not send a feather. The exorcists, Vaggie said from Izuku's right, her voice doing the thing it did when the past was very specifically present. Sarah turned to her. Something passed between them, recognition, complicated history, the particular tension of a former and current self in the same place. Loot, Sarah said simply. Loot, Vaggie confirmed. Izuku had been briefed on Loot, Adam's second in command, now operating in the power vacuum that Adam's death had left, and according to Alastair's intelligence reports, doing so with the radicalized certainty of someone who had converted grief into doctrine. She'd spent 11 weeks building a new exorcist force that was smaller than what Heaven had sent before but considerably more focused, trained specifically against the variables that had defeated the previous extermination. How long? Izuku asked. Sarah met his eyes. Weeks. Not months. How many? Enough. She paused. Loot has Heaven's institutional support in portions of the court that I cannot fully control. She has framed the dynasty specifically as an existential threat, a living power system operating in hell that has no place in the established order and that, if left unchecked, will eventually challenge Heaven's authority directly. Sarah looked at him. She's not entirely wrong about the trajectory. She's wrong about what to do about it, Izuku said. Convince me of that, Sarah said. The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours and was the most complex negotiation Izuku had been part of since the Alastair renegotiation, but operating at a completely different altitude. Sarah was not hostile, she was genuinely, carefully uncertain, and that uncertainty was productive in ways that hostility wasn't. She challenged. He answered. Charlie provided the program data, the documentation, the real evidence of real change that Nifty had been meticulously compiling for months. At the end of 2 hours, Sarah had not committed to anything. What she had done was listen, and what Izuku had established was the channel. A direct line between Heaven's administrative authority and the Verdant dynasty, outside of Loot's awareness, that could be used when the crisis arrived. It wasn't an alliance. It was a crack in a wall. But cracks were where things grew. Walking back to the hotel, Charlie pressed her shoulder against his briefly. She's going to try to stay neutral, she said. She's going to fail, Izuku said. When loot moves, Sarah will have to choose. I just needed her to have enough information before she makes that choice that she chooses correctly. And if she doesn't? He looked at the hotel's flag, visible now from this distance, the green lightning bolt bright against the crimson field. Then I fight everyone, he said simply. Charlie looked at him sideways. You say that very calmly. It would be a lot of work, he acknowledged. But it wouldn't be the first time. Loot moved on a Thursday. Izuku was in the workshop when the alert came, nifty, appearing in the doorway with the specific velocity she reserved for things that were actually urgent rather than things she found urgently interesting. Vaggie says the sky is doing the wrong thing, she said. He was moving before she finished the sentence. The sky above Pentagram City was doing the wrong thing. The purple had gone white at the edges in a spreading stain that moved too purposefully to be atmospheric. It was coming from the north and it was moving fast, and through it, becoming visible as the white pushed the purple back, were shapes. Armored shapes, winged, falling in formation, not the ragged mass of the previous extermination but tight, deliberate, coordinated. Military architecture. Someone had spent 11 weeks learning from what had failed before. Izuku stood on the hotel roof and counted. 43, Vaggie said from beside him, her weapon already out, her posture locked into the combat mode that was a completely different Vaggie from the person he'd been working with, harder, faster, older. Exorcist class. Full weapons complement. She paused. They're not heading for the hotel. He'd seen it at the same time. The formation wasn't aimed at the hotel. It was aimed at the Alliance network. The workshop district. The bakery district. The medical practice. The territory the dynasty had built, not the center but the roots. Loot had done her intelligence work. She knew the dynasty's power came from its connections, and she intended to cut those connections before engaging the center. Smart. Genuinely, frustratingly smart. She's going to kill civilians, Charlie said from the roof access behind him, and her voice had gone somewhere very cold and very specific. That's the point, Izuku said. Breaking the network and sending a message simultaneously. He turned. Vaggie, get everyone inside. Civilians in the surrounding blocks, anyone you can reach in the next 10 minutes. Get them into the hotel. The hotel can't hold, it'll hold. Get them in. He was already moving, already pulling one for all up from idle, already feeling the full charge of it build through him like a tide coming in. Green lightning crawled up his arms and he let it come, all of it, no ceiling, no management, the full reality of what he was. Alaster, Charlie said into the air. Already aware, my dear, Alaster's voice came from approximately everywhere at once, his static filling the ambient sound. I've taken the liberty of establishing certain deterrents around the hotel's immediate perimeter. The interior will hold. Izuku. Charlie grabbed his arm. He turned. Her face was doing the thing, the steel underneath everything thing. Don't hold back. I wasn't planning to, he said. I know. I just wanted to say it. She let go. Come back. Always, he said, and jumped off the roof. He hit the street outside the workshop district at speed, one for all at full, and the impact cratered the pavement in a 10-meter radius and the green lightning went horizontal in a pulse that knocked 3 exorcists out of their descent trajectory before they'd finished their approach. They'd seen the footage from his previous fights. He knew that because their formation adjusted immediately, splitting, circling, coming from multiple vectors instead of massing. They'd been briefed. They knew about Black Whip's range and Float's vertical capacity and they were trying to deny him the angles he'd used before. He gave them new angles they hadn't planned for. F.A. Jean had been charging for 11 weeks of daily movement in this city. Every step taken, every training session, every morning run through the hotel's surrounding blocks had been feeding the reservoir. He released a fraction of it now and it came out as a shockwave that wasn't targeted at any specific exorcist but at the formation itself, disrupting the geometry of their coordinated approach and turning a tactical unit into 11 separate problems. He was already moving through the first 3 before they fully separated. One for all at full was a different experience from one for all at partial, in the same way that a hurricane is a different experience from a strong wind, not the same thing with more intensity, but a different category of thing entirely. His body moved through the space between exorcists with a speed that made the air crack, and what it cracked against were beings that were stronger than anything he'd encountered in this world, fast and precise and carrying weapons that burned with heaven's authority. The burns were real. The first one caught his left shoulder and it hurt, genuinely hurt, the kind of pain that said this weapon was designed to affect things beyond the physical. He filed the pain and kept moving. The first exorcist he put down he restrained, black whip, tight, specific, designed to hold without damage. The second he hit with enough force to send them through 2 walls of an already evacuated building, calculating the trajectory to ensure the landing was survivable. The third tried a combo attack with 2 others and he went above it, float carrying him vertical while Black Whip pulled the 2 flanking attackers off balance, and then he came back down with Fa Jean in the descent and the impact was enough to feel 3 blocks away. He heard the battle sounds from the other districts, the bakery district, the medical practice. Vaggie had taken Angel Dust and Husk in the direction of the bakery district and the sounds from that direction were Vaggie's specific combat signature, precise and devastating, and something that was definitely Angel Dust being extremely effective in ways that would need to be discussed later from a collateral damage standpoint. Loot was in the sky above the workshop district. He saw her at the same moment she saw him, hovering in the white edge of the heaven-bleeding sky, silver-armored, watching the fight below with the expression of a commander assessing execution of a plan. When she looked at him the expression changed. Something hard and certain and absolute. The face of a person who had converted their grief into a weapon and was holding it with both hands. She dove. Loot was fast. Genuinely, categorically fast, in a way that told him she'd been the best in the Exorcist Corps for reasons beyond rank. She hit him at the center of the workshop district street with a weapon that came down like heaven's architectural intent, the kind of strike that was meant to make a point through scale rather than precision. He caught it. One hand, bare, the weapon stopped cold in his grip while the shockwave from the catch demolished the facades of the buildings on both sides of the street and the lightning from one for all ran up the weapon's shaft and set Loot's armor glowing green at the contact points. She stared at him. He looked back. Not angry. Not performing anything. Just present, totally present, holding a weapon that was designed to end things and simply not letting it. Loot, he said. Let go, she said through her teeth. Not yet. He held her gaze. I know what Adam meant to you. I know what his death cost. And I know that what you've built since then, the new core, this operation, is a monument to that cost. You've been thorough. You've been smart. He looked at her steadily. And you're about to lose 11 weeks of work and the political goodwill of the portion of heaven that was still undecided, and you're going to do it in full view of every screen in Pentagram City because Vox's network is broadcasting this whether he wants to or not, because this is the biggest event in the Pride Ring in months. Her grip on the weapon tightened. You can't stop, I already have, he said. Count your people. She looked. She counted. 31 of her 43 were down, restrained, incapacitated, or in the process of being contained by Vaggie's strike team, which had been moving faster and more effectively than Loot's intel had apparently projected. The remaining 12 were pulling back, reassessing, because the ground operation had gone wrong and they were trained well enough to know when to regroup. You have 12 left functional, Izuku said. If we fight until there's a winner, I win, and the story Vox's cameras tell is that the Verdant dynasty destroyed a Heaven assault force. That story is permanently damaging to Heaven's authority. Every soul in hell hears it and draws conclusions. He met her eyes. Or you call the remaining 12 back, and I release the 31 with no additional damage, and the story is a military operation that met unexpected resistance. That story is manageable. It doesn't end heaven's authority. It just means you need a different strategy. She was breathing hard. The weapon was still in his grip and she was still pulling against it with the residual momentum of everything she'd invested in this operation. He believed in the exterminations, she said. Adam believed it was right. That this was right. I know, Izuku said. You don't get to build something here. Not here. The rules exist to protect the powerful from having to reckon with what they've built, he said, and his voice was quiet and his eyes were not. That's what rules usually are, in systems that haven't been examined. I don't think you're a bad person, Lute. I think you loved someone, and you lost them, and you built your grief into doctrine because that's what people do when they can't hold the grief any other way. He paused. But doctrine built from grief isn't justice. It's just grief with better armor. The silence that followed was the longest one. Then, one by one, the muscles in Lute's grip released. Slightly. Not surrender, she was not built for surrender, but a fraction of release that meant she was hearing rather than just defending. Call them back, Izuku said quietly. Today doesn't have to be the ending of something. It can be the beginning of a different conversation. You're asking me to trust the thing I came here to destroy. I'm asking you to look at what I actually am, he said. Not what the doctrine says I am. What's actually in front of you right now? Another silence. The cameras were still running. The city was very quiet for something on fire at the edges. Lute pulled her weapon back. He let her take it. She straightened in the air with the composed dignity of someone who had not accepted defeat but had accepted a different definition of the engagement. Call them back, she said, into the air, in the command register that carried to her remaining 12. They came. They regrouped. And they withdrew back into the white-bled sky, which slowly, over the following 20 minutes, retreated from the purple until Pentagram City's sky was its own color again. Izuku stood in the workshop district street in the aftermath, surrounded by 31 restrained exorcists and the debris of approximately 4 building facades, one for all's lightning winding slowly down from full to idle. His shoulder burned where the earlier weapon had connected. His hands were steady. The exorcists he released one by one over the following hour. Each one went the same way, back into the sky, back toward heaven, without additional incident. He watched each of them go with the attention he gave to things that would need to be tracked later. The last one, an exorcist young enough that youth was still visible through the armor and the training, paused before going. Looked at Izuku with an expression that was doing several things at once, assessment chief among them. You could have destroyed them, the young exorcist said. All of them. Yes, Izuku said. Why didn't you? Because destroyed isn't the goal, he said. Destroyed just makes more loots. The young exorcist stared at him for a moment longer. Then went. The hotel was intact. Every person Vaggie had moved into it was uninjured. The Alliance network had taken damage, the bakery district had 2 collapsed walls, the workshop district looked like a storm had moved through it, and the medical practice had a structural crack that was serious but reparable. Nobody was dead. The community was shaken and the shaking was real and important and deserved acknowledgement, but they were alive and the foundations were whole. Alastair reported that his perimeter deterrence had handled 3 exorcists who'd aimed at the hotel directly, handling them with an efficiency he described only as satisfying. Vaggie had a gash across her arm that she'd wrapped herself and was refusing to have looked at until she'd finished her incident report, which Izuku overruled by sitting her down personally and applying the first aid while she talked. She accepted this with the grace of someone who had learned to recognize when arguing was less efficient than compliance. Lute, she said while he worked. What did you say to her? The truth, he said. The truth made her back off. The truth plus the cameras, he said. The truth alone sometimes isn't enough. But the truth with sufficient audience changes the cost calculation. Vaggie looked at him. She's not done. No, he agreed. But she's different now. She heard something she didn't expect to hear and she's going to have to do something with it. That takes time. He finished rapping. Time is what we need. Charlie found him on the roof that night. Same spot, same stars, or what passed for stars in hell's sky, the distant lights that might have been stars and might have been something else entirely. She sat down beside him and leaned against him without preamble, and he put his arm around her and they looked at the city. The dynasty's flag above them had taken some smoke damage. Still flying. The bakery district owner came to see me this afternoon, Charlie said. Old demon, been there for 200 years. Told me he'd never had anyone fight for his building before. She paused. He cried. He didn't want me to see, but I saw. Izuku was quiet. The Verdant Dynasty, she said. A month ago it was just a name. Now it's real. People know what it means. They know what happens when someone threatens it and what happens when someone joins it. She looked up at him. You made it real. We made it real, he said. You're going to make me argue with you about this. You built the program. Vaggie built the defense. Nifty built the infrastructure. Alaster built the legal framework. Husk built the culture. Angel built the human face of it. He looked at her. I made it harder to destroy. That's not the same as building it. Charlie looked at him for a long time. You are, she said finally, the most infuriating and wonderful person I have ever met. I've been told. She kissed him, and it was the kind of kiss that came after something hard was over, relief in it, warmth, the particular tenderness of two people who had been scared for each other all day and were now in the same place at the same temperature. His scroll device, a hell-native communication tool that Nifty had configured for him 3 weeks in, chimed. He broke from Charlie to read it, and his expression shifted. Sarah, he said. Charlie read over his arm. The message was short, in the precise language of someone who had chosen every word with care. The operation today was Lutz, not sanctioned by my office. I am initiating an internal review. What you said to her is being discussed at levels I did not anticipate. I need more time. Don't give me a reason to run out of it. She's moving, Charlie said. She was always going to move, Izuku said. She just needed to see what she was actually choosing between. He set the scroll down. She needed today to happen. You didn't engineer it, no, he said honestly. But I was ready for it. He looked out at the city, at the flag, at the lights of the dynasty's territory visible in the pattern of which buildings were lit and how they were lit, different now from 11 weeks ago, the difference of a place that had been claimed not by force but by choice. What's next? Charlie asked. Vox, he said. The disinformation channel has been feeding him for 3 weeks. He's about to make a move based on intelligence he thinks is reliable and isn't. He paused. When he makes it publicly and it fails publicly, the network cracks. And after that? After that, he paused, thinking ahead to the next phase, the expansion beyond the Pride Ring, the conversation that needed to happen with Lucifer about the other 6 rings, the bridge to Sarah that needed to be built into something permanent. After that we build the next thing. Charlie laughed quietly. We're always building the next thing. Is that a problem? She settled back against him, looking at the city they'd made together, the hotel below them full of the particular warmth of people who were safe and knew it. No, she said. It's exactly right. The fires of hell burned on the horizon and the flag moved above them, and somewhere in the city's vast ancient hum the Verdant Dynasty breathed with the steady rhythm of something that had been tested and had not bent, and the sky above was that deep permanent purple that had stopped looking wrong to Izuku sometime around the 4th week and had started looking like home. Chapter 6, Empire of Green. Vox made his move on a Saturday. Which was, Izuku had to admit, better timing than he'd expected. The 3 weeks of carefully managed disinformation had been fed through the hotel's 3 inside contacts with the precision of a metronome, just enough truth wrapped around each piece of false intelligence to make the whole package credible. Vox had received, over those 3 weeks, a detailed picture of the Verdant Dynasty's alliance network that was accurate in its geography but wrong in its depth. He believed the Bakery District was the dynasty's most critical node. He believed Carmilla had attached conditions to her understanding that made the alliance fragile. He believed Izuku had a specific vulnerability, a channel of one for all's output that created a recovery window after sustained full power use. None of it was true. Vox's move was elegant by his standards, a coordinated legal and physical assault designed to exploit all 3 false vulnerabilities simultaneously. A contract challenge against the Bakery District filed through Hell's commercial courts at 9 in the morning, timed to create a credibility crisis with Carmilla, whose alliance terms supposedly required no legal complications. And at the same time, a public broadcast across every screen in Pentagram City announcing that the Verdant Dynasty's alliance network was financially compromised, built on false promises, and structurally unsound. The broadcast went live on every screen, including the screens in the Bakery District, where the owner, briefed 3 days earlier, because he deserved to know what was coming for his building, was standing in front of his shop with Nifty's documentation of the dynasty's economic network in hand, fielding questions from the journalists that Nifty had also arranged to be present, because Nifty was the kind of organizational genius who understood that the best counter to a narrative was a better prepared alternative narrative, delivered simultaneously. The contract challenge hit the commercial courts at 9. The dynasty's legal counter-filing, prepared by Alastair 2 weeks ago and held in readiness, hit the same courts at 9:01. Izuku watched this from the hotel's communications room, a space Nifty had built from scratch over the past month, screens and contact networks and organizational infrastructure that would have looked impressive in a government building. Charlie was beside him. Vaggie was running the street-level team with the focused intensity of someone who had been waiting for a specific problem to arrive and was deeply satisfied to finally address it. The broadcast kept running. "He's committed to it," Charlie said, watching the screens. "He can't pull it back now without looking like he got it wrong," Izuku confirmed. "Which is exactly the condition we needed. The broadcast is his word to every soul in Pentagram City. When the documentation comes out," the documentation came out 40 minutes later. Nifty had prepared a counter-broadcast, actual footage, actual economic records, actual testimony from Alliance Network members, and had gotten it onto 3 independent channels before Vox's network could suppress it. 3 channels became 7 when the mid-tier media operations who'd been watching the dynasty's rise for weeks recognized a significant story and made the obvious professional decision. By noon, Vox's screens were carrying 2 things, his own broadcast claiming the dynasty was compromised, and the counter-evidence running on competing channels that were being picked up and reshared across Pentagram City's information networks faster than his algorithm could manage. In the commercial courts, the contract challenge was dismissed at 11:47 on the grounds that it conflicted with an existing dynastic claim, exactly the precedent Alastair had established during the Angel Dust situation, now deployed at full scale. Vox went quiet. Not the tactical quiet of someone recalibrating, the specific, deep quiet of someone whose carefully constructed move had been reversed in real time in front of an audience he'd built himself. Every soul in Pentagram City who watched Vox Tech had watched the operation fail. The network that ran on his authority being absolute had just broadcast his authority being insufficient, and the algorithm that processed engagement and attention was now, with the mechanical indifference of all algorithms, pointing every metric downward. "It won't destroy him," Izuku said that afternoon, reviewing the numbers Nifty had compiled with the speed of someone who found data genuinely thrilling. "He's too established for one failure to collapse the network." "But?" Charlie read his expression. "But overlords hold power through reputation. And reputation in hell is a system of perpetual maintenance. You're only as strong as your last demonstration." He looked at the territorial map. "He's going to need to rebuild credibility before he moves again. That's 6 months minimum. Probably longer." He paused. "Long enough for what comes next." "What comes next," Charlie said, and there was something in her voice, anticipation, the particular quality of someone who could see the shape of the future and had decided they liked what they saw. "Expansion," he said. Beyond the Pride Ring. She looked at the map. At the 6 other rings beyond Pride. At the vast complicated architecture of Hell's geography that stretched out from this district in every direction, each ring its own world, its own power structure, its own population of souls who had never heard of the Verdant dynasty and had never had anyone suggest to them that things could be different. All 7 rings, she said. Eventually, he said. Correctly. Not by force, by the same method as the Pride Ring. Alliance. Relevance. Making the dynasty something that people choose to be part of because it genuinely serves them. He looked at her. Your program, scaled up. Not just the hotel. A network of redemption centers across every ring, each one adapted to the local conditions, each one connected to the others. Charlie was very still. That's the whole dream, she said quietly. That's what I imagined when I was trying to explain it to people who thought it was naive. Not just one hotel. The whole thing. It was never naive, he said. It was just ahead of its infrastructure. She laughed, sudden and genuine. You're going to make me cry, and I specifically decided not to do that today. Bad timing on my part, he said. The worst, she agreed, and kissed him quickly and turned back to the map with the bright purposeful expression of someone whose dream had just gotten a foundation poured under it. Lucifer arrived 2 days later, unannounced, which was his operating mode regardless of what Charlie said about calling ahead. He materialized in the hotel lobby with the contained energy of someone who had been sitting with a specific feeling for several days and had decided to come deliver it in person. He found Izuku in the workshop, alone, working through the expansion logistics, the territorial maps of the other 6 rings spread across the workbench, annotated in 3 colors. Lucifer stood in the doorway for a moment looking at the maps with the particular expression of someone who recognized thoroughness. You're planning to go to all of them, he said. Yes, Izuku said, without looking up. The Gluttony Ring alone has political complications that have stumped entities who've been operating in Hell for centuries. I know. I've been reading everything Alastair has on it. He did look up now. Sit down. Lucifer sat. He picked up a rubber duck from his pocket, which appeared to be reflexive, and turned it over while looking at the maps. For a moment neither of them said anything, and the silence had the specific quality of a conversation that had been building for a while and was taking its time arriving. You're going to do this, Lucifer said finally. It wasn't a question. Yes. The whole expansion. The program across all 7 rings. The dynasty as a genuine political power in Hell's total structure. Yes. Lucifer was quiet. I tried to change Hell, he said. A long time ago. Before everything, before the fall, before the rules calcified, before Lilith, he stopped. The name landed in the room the way it always did, like weather. I had ideas about what this place could be. What the souls here deserved. He turned the duck. And then the world happened, and the politics happened, and he stopped again. I made a smaller piece with a smaller world. Charlie didn't, Izuku said. No, Lucifer agreed. She didn't. He looked at Izuku with the expression he reserved for moments of actual truth. I was afraid for her. Every time she talked about the program, about what she wanted to build, the bigger she dreamed it, the more afraid I was. Because I knew what happened to big dreams in Hell. He paused. I didn't account for someone falling through her ceiling. Izuku smiled slightly. Neither did I. Lucifer looked at him steadily. She's different since you, he said. Not changed, she was already everything she is. But, settled, somehow. Like she was carrying the dream alone before and now the weight is distributed. She does the same thing for me, Izuku said honestly. Lucifer was quiet for a moment. Then something in him shifted, a physical thing, the release of something held a long time. The expansion, he said. You'll need more than alliance networks and legal infrastructure in some of those rings. You'll need power backing that goes beyond what the dynasty has established in the Pride Ring. I know, Izuku said. I've been trying to figure out how to ask you. You weren't going to ask. I was going to find a different way. I don't like asking for things that might create obligation. Lucifer looked at him for a moment. Then he laughed, not the performed variety, but the real thing, and it transformed his face briefly into something younger. My daughter married a hero, he said, as if confirming something to himself. He set the rubber duck down on the workbench with the finality of a decision. You don't need to ask. You have it. Whatever the Verdant dynasty needs from Lucifer Magna in the expansion process, he gestured, it's there. Just like that? Izuku said. My daughter is happy, Lucifer said simply. And she's building the thing she always wanted to build. Everything else is logistics. He stood. Besides, he added, something lighter in his tone, watching Vox's network collapse in real time yesterday was genuinely one of the more satisfying afternoons I've had in decades. He left with the same unannounced energy he'd arrived with, and Izuku sat for a moment with the particular feeling of something structural clicking into place. Then he turned back to the maps and added a new notation in the margin of the Gluttony Ring section. It simply read, Lucifer, confirmed. The letter from Sarah arrived 3 weeks later. Not a feather this time, an actual document, formal, written in the precise language of Heaven's administrative apparatus. Izuku read it twice, then brought it to Charlie, then called a full meeting of the hotel's inner circle because what it contained warranted everyone hearing it together. They assembled in the dining room, Charlie at the center, Vaggie at her right, Izuku at her left, Alastair at the far end with his tea, Nifty beside him with a notepad already open, Husk behind the serving counter in his standard position of being technically not at the table while being completely at the table, and Angel Dust sprawled in a chair sideways with his legs over one arm, which was his version of formal posture. Izuku read the letter aloud. The substance of it was this: Sarah had completed her internal review of the extermination protocol. The review had reached conclusions that the review committee had not expected to reach, driven in significant part by the documented results of the Hazbin Hotel's redemption program over the past 3 months. The conclusions were that the current extermination approach was, in Sarah's precise administrative language, operationally counterproductive to Heaven's stated purpose of redemption. The extermination protocol was being suspended pending a complete framework review. The review would take time, months, possibly longer, but the next scheduled extermination was not going forward. The room was very quiet when he finished reading. Charlie had gone very still. Her hands were flat on the table and she was looking at the letter with the expression of someone who had been running toward a wall for years and had just watched the wall become a door. Suspended, she said. Pending review, Izuku confirmed. She stopped. Her voice had done something complicated. She tried again. That's the whole thing. That's what we've been, it's not permanent yet, Vaggie said carefully. Not to diminish it, Vaggie's expression was doing the thing it did when something genuine was happening and she was trying to hold it steadily instead of letting it overflow. The review could go the wrong way. It won't, Izuku said. How do you know? Because Sarah is smart enough to look at documented evidence and reach correct conclusions, and we've spent 3 months building the most thorough documented evidence of genuine soul rehabilitation that this cosmology has ever seen, and Nifty's filing system is flawless. He looked at Nifty. Nifty sat up very straight. It is, she confirmed. It is absolutely flawless. Angel Dust had gone quiet, which was notable. He was looking at the table with his expression doing the complicated thing, the one he wore when something reached the part of him that was underneath all the performance, the part that had come to the hotel carrying the weight of a long history and had been slowly, carefully, setting pieces of that weight down over months of genuine work. So they stop coming, he said. They just stop. For now, Izuku said. And the review process gives us a channel into Heaven's policy apparatus that we haven't had before. We can put people in front of that review. Real people, talking about real change. That's more powerful than any argument we could make from outside. Clara, Charlie said immediately. Clara, Izuku agreed. And 3 others who are ready. Vaggie can identify them, she knows the program residents better than anyone. Vaggie nodded once, already running the assessment in her head. Husk put a bottle on the bar. Not a fancy bottle, his everyday bottle, and poured glasses without asking anyone what they wanted. He carried them to the table himself, which he had not done in any group meeting before, and set them down with the particular care of someone performing a ceremony they decided deserved to be performed. Well, he said, back at the bar, picking up his own glass. That's something. That's everything, Charlie said softly. Alastor raised his glass with the smile that was the real one. To the Verdant dynasty, he said. Which has managed, in 4 months, to do what I estimated would take a generation. He paused. I am, genuinely pleased to have been wrong about the timeline. From you, Vaggie said, that might be the highest compliment possible. It absolutely is, Alastor confirmed pleasantly. They drank. And in the particular warmth of that dining room, with the flag flying above and the city outside and the whole vast complicated world of hell and heaven beyond that, something that had been straining toward a conclusion for as long as Charlie had been dreaming reached it, not with fanfare but with the quiet satisfaction of a foundation that had been poured correctly and had set. The expansion began 6 weeks later. Not all at once, sequentially, methodically, with the same alliance-first approach that had built the Pride Ring territory. Izuku went first to the Sloth Ring, which Alastor had identified as the most receptive to the dynasty's model, and spent 2 weeks establishing contact networks and identifying potential partners before the first outreach building opened. Small, deliberately so, a single converted structure in the Sloth Ring's main district, staffed by 2 program graduates from the hotel who had agreed to go as the dynasty's first representatives beyond the Pride Ring. He was back in the Pride Ring within 3 weeks, and while he was gone Vaggie ran the hotel's operations with the focused precision of someone who had been waiting for the chance to demonstrate what she could do at full capacity, which turned out to be considerably more than even Izuku had estimated. He told her this on his return and she told him she knew, and the exchange was so perfectly them that Angel Dust, overhearing it from the hallway, made a noise of deep contentment and went to tell Nifty about it. The Greed Ring followed the Sloth Ring. Carmilla's territory made the entry smoother than it would have been elsewhere. Odette had been quietly preparing the ground for weeks, and Clara, now 3 months into her own program work, had become something unexpected and valuable. She was good with people. Not in Charlie's way, Charlie's warmth was immediate and absolute. Clara's was more careful, more considered, the warmth of someone who had learned to be precise about trust and was therefore trusted precisely. The souls she worked with responded to her in ways that expanded the program's reach into demographics it had struggled to access. The Wrath Ring was harder. Izuku spent a week there alone before anyone else arrived, and the week was the hardest physical work he'd done since arriving in Hell, not because the threats were greater than anything he'd faced before, but because the Wrath Ring's power structure was built entirely on dominance demonstration and couldn't be approached through the alliance model without first establishing that the dynasty's presence couldn't be challenged. He'd known this going in. He'd prepared for it. He spent a week in the Wrath Ring demonstrating, with the calm thoroughness of someone who didn't need to prove anything but was willing to do it anyway for the sake of moving forward, that the Verdant dynasty's physical presence in their territory was a fact rather than a question. He did not destroy. He did not conquer. He moved through the ring's challenges the way water moves through rock, not violently, but with the absolute certainty of something that has decided where it's going. By the end of the week, 3 of the Wrath Ring's major power holders had sent representatives to discuss terms. Not surrender, terms. The distinction mattered and Izuku honored it. He came home from the Wrath Ring with a healing gash across his ribs that he hadn't mentioned in his dispatches, and Charlie found it the first morning back and looked at him with the specific expression she wore when she was choosing between several responses. "You didn't tell me," she said. "It wasn't serious." Izuku. "It's healing. One for All's recovery rate in this dimension has actually improved over the past 4 months, which is interesting and I've been documenting, Izuku." He stopped. She looked at him steadily. Not angry, something more important than angry. We built this together, she said. All of it. That means the parts where it cost something too. Not just the strategy sessions and the victories. She reached out and put her hand against his ribs, careful. You don't have to manage what I know to protect me. I know, he said. I know that. He paused, finding the honest version. I've been managing information my whole life. What to tell people who care about me so they don't have to carry extra weight. It's a habit. A bad one, she said, not unkindly. A bad one, he agreed. I'm working on it. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she kissed him, gently, and rested her forehead against his. Come back whole, she said. That's the deal. Come back whole and tell me what it cost. Deal, he said. They stood like that for a moment in the workshop, with the maps on the walls and the 5 rings yet to go and all of Hell's complicated future spread out around them, and neither of them moved because the moment was exactly what it was and both of them knew how to be present for things that mattered. Loot came back in the 8th month. Not with an army. Alone, which was the most significant thing about it. She came to the hotel's front door at midday and knocked, which was the second most significant thing, and when Nifty opened the door and called for Charlie, it was Izuku who came down first. They looked at each other in the hotel doorway. Loot looked different from the fight. Not physically, she was the same, precise and silver-armored and carrying herself with the compact certainty of someone who had never learned to be casual about anything. But something in the set of her expression was different. The absolute quality had developed a crack in it, not weakness, but the particular fracture that happens when something that was load-bearing gets reconsidered. I'm not here officially, she said. I know, he said. Come in. She stepped inside the hotel with the careful posture of someone entering territory they don't fully understand, and the hotel received her the way it received everyone, with the particular ambient warmth of a place where people had been trying hard for a long time. She stood in the lobby and looked around at the notice board where program residents posted updates and the small gallery Nifty had built up before and after documentation and the schedule on the wall with the names of every soul currently working through the program. There were 47 names on the current schedule. Loot stood in front of the schedule for a long time. The review, she said finally. It's going well, Izuku said. Sarah's team has been thorough. I know. I read the transcripts. She turned from the schedule. Clara Carmine's testimony. Angel Dust's documentation. The 6 souls who spoke to the review committee about their experience. She paused. I reviewed all of it. And she stopped. Something in her expression did a difficult thing, the internal equivalent of a structural adjustment. Adam wasn't wrong about everything. The order exists for reasons. The separation of heaven and hell exists because without it, the framework, she stopped again. But he was wrong about this. About whether change was possible. She met Izuku's eyes. He was wrong and I defended his being wrong for 8 months because it was easier than the other option. Which was? Izuku said, not prompting. Just making space. Accepting that he's gone and the reason he's gone was his own choices, she said quietly. Not yours. Not the hotel's. His. The lobby was very quiet. Charlie had appeared at the top of the main stairs and was standing still, listening, not interrupting. I'm not, Loot started. I'm not here to join the program or sign an alliance or any of the things I know you're building. She looked at Izuku steadily. I'm here because you said something to me in the street during the fight that I've been thinking about for 4 months. About grief with armor. I remember, he said. It was accurate, she said, and the 2 words clearly cost something significant. I'm working on the armor. She glanced around the lobby one more time. At the schedule. At the names. I wanted to see it, she said. What you actually built. Not the intelligence reports. The real thing. Now you've seen it, Izuku said. Now I've seen it. She turned toward the door. Stopped. Sarah is going to make the suspension permanent, she said, to the door rather than to him. The review committee vote is next week. I wanted you to know. She left without ceremony, silver and composed, stepping back out into the pentagram city street and heading north with the posture of someone who had somewhere to be and something to think about on the way. Izuku stood in the lobby doorway and watched her go. Charlie came down the stairs and stood beside him. That was, Charlie said. Yeah, he agreed. Do you think she'll, eventually, he said. She has a long way to go still. But she started moving. He closed the hotel door gently. That's all it ever is. Someone starting to move. Charlie put her arm through his. That's your whole philosophy in one sentence. Is that too simple? She laughed. It's exactly simple enough. The Sarah announcement came the following Wednesday. It came as an official Heaven communication, the full formal apparatus, broadcast through channels that hadn't been used for interdimensional communication since before the last extermination. The suspension was permanent. The extermination protocol was officially abolished. A joint review commission would be established, Heaven and the Verdant dynasty as co-chairs, to develop new guidelines for managing the relationship between the two realms. Pentagram City heard it on every screen simultaneously. Vox's network carried it because it had no mechanism for suppressing an official Heaven broadcast, and the algorithm processed the engagement numbers as the highest single event figures in the network's history and reported them to Vox with the mechanical indifference of a system that did not care about its owner's feelings. The hotel didn't explode into celebration immediately. What happened first was quieter, people standing in the lobby and the common room and the front plaza, the program residents and the Alliance Network members and the craftsmen from the workshop district who'd walked over when the announcement came through, standing together in the particular stillness of people who had just heard something they'd been told was impossible. Angel Dust sat on the lobby stairs with his arms on his knees and his face in his hands for a long moment. When he looked up his eyes were red and he appeared entirely unbothered by anyone seeing it. Nifty was already drafting the Joint Commission organizational framework. She had been for 2 weeks, because she was nifty. Husk poured drinks for everyone in reach without being asked and did it with the particular deliberate warmth of someone who had chosen, at some point in the past several months, to let himself be warm and had found it suited him. Alastair was smiling the real smile, and it looked strange on him, genuinely joyful, briefly and without performance, before he composed it back into his usual register. Izuku caught it. He suspected Alastair knew he'd caught it. Neither of them mentioned it. Vaggie stood in the middle of the lobby with her arms at her sides and looked around at all of it, the hotel that was a dynasty now, the program that was a movement, the people who had walked in broken and were walking around whole, and her expression was the one she wore when she had arrived at the conclusion of a very long assessment. She looked at Charlie. Charlie looked back. Something passed between them that didn't need words, the full weight of the history, the extermination, the years of carrying the dream alone, the cost of all of it, and on the other side of all of it, this. Here. Real. Vaggie crossed the lobby in 4 steps and hugged Charlie, which was not something she did publicly and which she did now without apparent self-consciousness, and Charlie hugged her back with the full force of 8 months of everything. Izuku looked away to give them the moment and found Lucifer standing in the hotel doorway with his hat slightly askew and his eyes bright and a rubber duck held against his chest with both hands in the manner of someone anchoring themselves to something solid because the feeling was otherwise too large. "Hi, Dad," Charlie said from across the room, muffled against Vaggie's shoulder. "Hi, kid," Lucifer said, and his voice was doing several things at once and managing none of them particularly well, which was the most genuine he'd sounded in months. That evening the celebration was everything Nifty had designed it to be, large, warm, loud, full of the particular joy that belongs to things that are real rather than performed. The plaza outside the hotel held more people than it had on the day of Angel Dust's showcase, and the city's ambient sound had a different quality, something lighter threading through its usual register. Izuku sat on the hotel roof. Not alone, Charlie was beside him, and they'd slipped away from the celebration for 20 minutes because they both needed the quiet of it, the particular space that existed between them that didn't require anything from either of them and therefore recharged something that the rest of the world drew from constantly. He looked out at the city. At the 7 rings whose fires he could chart now by memory, each one distinct, each one in some stage of the dynasty's expanding presence. The Sloth Ring building was 3 months operational and had a waiting list. The Greed Ring was producing results that Carmilla had called him personally to discuss. The Wrath Ring's partnership was rough but real. 4 rings yet to begin. Years of work ahead. The Joint Commission with Heaven. The review process. The political maintenance of what they'd built and the continued building of what came next. The green flag above them moved in the thermal currents. "What are you thinking?" Charlie asked. "How much is left?" he said. "Is that good or bad?" He considered it honestly. "Good," he said. "There's a version of this story where the goal was just to stabilize the hotel and survive the extermination and make the redemption program credible. And we could have stopped there. Called it finished. We couldn't have," she said. "Neither of us could have." "No," he agreed. "Because the thing I learned from One for All, the thing every person who carried it before me understood, is that power without direction is just noise. The direction is the whole point. The direction is what makes it mean something." He looked at her. "You were the direction. From the moment you described the program, you were exactly that." Charlie looked at him steadily. "You're going to make me cry again." "Accurate vision," he said. She laughed and leaned against him and he put his arm around her and they looked at hell, their hell now, the one they were building into something that neither of them had been able to fully picture before they were building it together. Below them the celebration went on, warm and real, the voices of people who had chosen this place and been chosen by it drifting up through the evening air. "We should go back down," she said, not moving. "In a minute," he said. "In a minute," she agreed. The fires burned on the horizon and the flag moved above them and somewhere in the depths of Pentagram City a version of Vox's algorithm was processing the day's engagement data and producing numbers that told a story about what had captured the city's attention, what it had chosen to watch and care about, and the story was the same one it had been telling for 8 months in different registers. Something was alive here. Something that hadn't been alive before. Something that grew. The dynasty breathed in the hotel below them, in the network of buildings and alliances and people spread across the Pride Ring and reaching outward into the other 6, in the Joint Commission documents Nifty had already filed in triplicate, in the 47 names on the program schedule and the waiting list behind them, in the flag above, green lightning on crimson, the colors of a choice made at the bottom of a fall. Izuku looked at his hands. The green lightning was quiet, barely visible, just a trace, just the ghost of it that was always there now, woven into who he was in this world as thoroughly as it had been woven into who he was in his own. He thought about his mother. About Ochiko and Ida. About All Might in his diminished form carrying enormous things in small hands. He thought about the letter he'd sent through Lucifer's dimensional bridge 3 months ago, and the letter that had come back, his mother's handwriting, shaking slightly, "I'm glad you're safe, I'm glad you're happy, come home when you can and tell me everything." He thought about what home meant now, and how it had gotten complicated in the best way, the way all important things eventually did. He'd find a way back. Not to leave, to show them. To bring Charlie, when the time was right and the dynasty was stable enough for its founders to travel. To sit in a kitchen in Japan and watch his mother meet the Princess of Hell and watch the Princess of Hell be exactly who she was at a kitchen table in Japan. That was a future he intended to build. He always built the next thing. "Okay," Charlie said, straightening. "Now we go back down." "Now we go back down," he agreed. They stood up together, easy and natural, the way 2 people stand up when they've been standing beside each other long enough that the movement is synchronized without trying. Charlie reached up and adjusted his collar with the absent domestic certainty of someone who had claimed a person and intended to keep claiming them, which was its own kind of declaration. He caught her hand. Held it for a moment. She smiled. Not the big one. The real one. They went back down. The celebration received them the way celebrations receive the people they belong to, noise and warmth and angel dust saying something immediately that required a response and Nifty producing a scheduling question that could have waited and Husk pressing drinks into their hands and Alastair raising his glass from across the room with the particular expression of something ancient that had found, against considerable odds, something worth protecting. Vaggie met Izuku's eyes across the room and nodded once. He nodded back. The dynasty carried on. The work continued. The dream, which had once been so large that carrying it alone had cost everything, was shared now, distributed through every person in this building and every building in this network and every soul who had walked through a door somewhere in Hell's geography and been told, for the first time, that they could be something different than what their worst moment had made them. Outside, the fires burned. Inside, something burned brighter. The Empire of Green, built from a fall through a ceiling, from a conversation on a rooftop, from a ring made in a basement workshop, from 47 demons who walked out a door and a radio demon's real smile and a feather that didn't burn and a mother's letter in shaking handwriting, it was here. Real. Rooted. Growing. And it intended to keep growing, ring by ring, soul by soul, choice by choice, for as long as there was work to do and people who needed someone to believe the work was worth it. Izuku Midoriya, who had once been told he could never be a hero, who had carried the weight of 9 people's hope in his body and the weight of one person's dream in his heart, stood in the hotel lobby of the Verdant Dynasty with green lightning quiet on his hands and the sound of people celebrating something real all around him and felt, with the complete uncomplicated certainty of someone who knew exactly where they were, that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He always had been. From the moment he fell.